So let's start. First of all, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Digital Innovation Networks Forum. Good afternoon. My name is Monique Caristi, and I'm the coordinator of the two projects that actually collaborated to organize this event. I'm very happy to be here with you. We are broadcasting the event. That's why we try to keep the pace and make sure that we are in time also for our remote speakers to fit into the agenda. But as you know, one of the first speakers should be Peter Fatelnik, the head of the Next Generation Internet Unit, and he anticipated he might be a few minutes late. So we'll try to be adaptive, and when Peter comes, we will give the floor to him for his presentation about the Next Generation Internet Forum. So actually, slides will progress. Next slides, please. So as I mentioned, there's two projects that helped coordinating this event, and these two projects are the FIRE study and the HUB4NGI. So as the name says and indicates, the FIRE study was focusing on FIRE, the FIRE initiative, which was future internet research and experimentation focused. And HUB4NGI is a recent project that started in January this year that focuses on providing support to bootstrap the whole NGI initiative. These two projects have been working closely in these last few months, especially in view of the end of the FIRE study and the takeover of the HUB4NGI. And the idea is to create a sort of continuity for efforts that have been going on over the last few years, and that can help organizations to actually understand how to move into the NGI as a new initiative. So what we did within the context of the FIRE study was to analyze key elements that are critical to the digitization of the society, essentially, of processes that are guiding how innovation takes place. And we did a study, within the study, we did a Delphi study by involving external experts, and this has led to the publication of a short white paper and to debates that have taken place in February here in Brussels. Some of these experts are going to be with us today remotely in one of the later sessions, but what we decided to do was to enlarge the discussion we started within the study and engage other people, other speakers. So today we will have, sorry, I automatically, thanks a lot. So the idea, as you might have already checked on the dedicated page of to the DIN forum, is that we try today to have an interactive discussion to understand what are the key priorities and how the digital innovation networks can effectively contribute to shape and guide efforts towards the construction of a new internet, an internet that should be focused, that should be centered on humans. What does that mean? We will try to discuss today. So before, next slide please. So we have Wi-Fi access. I guess you can see here the coordinates in case you need. We have a broadcast, so the event can be followed remotely. If you want to tell your colleagues that are not sitting here, please go ahead. Next slide, please. And of course, what I will ask you to do is to do a lot of noise. So if you take pictures, if you catch statements that you think are particularly meaningful, or if you want to take a picture of me, I'm kidding, please try to use the hashtag dedicated to this event, that is DIN Forum 17. And you will see that pictures, statements, moments of today will be tweeted through the FIRE and through the NGI Twitter channels. Next slide, please. Okay, so the idea was to start with this short introduction that I gave you, and to give the floor to the European Commission to give us a little bit more of an insight in what are the planned next steps, what is the overall vision. We will do that as soon as Peter is here. So now I will quickly go through the agenda, which, so next slide. There's a little delay due to the broadcasting machinery, but you know, be patient. So the first session will be chaired by Alexander Mikroyanidis from Open University. I hope I pronounce it correct. And we will have Mathieu Daquin, Magda Borovic, and Axel Polaris. I will let Alex and the speakers introduce themselves. And the main focus will be on the RTD challenges for NGI. So we will try to have a debate guided by the presentations that will be given on the RTD challenges. Then the second session, which will be chaired by me, actually. It's gonna give voice to 4 speakers that I would like to thank very much for having accepted this invitation. Giorgio Micheletti from IDC, Manuel Neuer from Linknovate, Fiorenza Liparini from Plus Value, and Marie-Paul Audini from a long list of organizations, but Hewlett Packard Enterprise, but she's also representing the ETSI and NFV Industry Specification Group. We will see from different angles, standardization, social innovation, research trend, market and business perspective, what should be the priorities to shape an internet that should put the human at the center. Then in the next slide,
the perception. Many users have the perception. And internet today is driven by apps, it's driven by devices, and it's probably driven by a certain reduced set of companies. That is not the internet we want in 15 or 20 years from now. Because later on I will be talking about some of the concerns we in Consultations have detected with internet users. And if we tackle them, we'll have to move away from some of the concepts which we think are given by God, but none of them is, or none of them are. We can change anything we want. And that includes also the internet, how it functions, and what value it delivers. And it's a little bit, when I talk about ambitious, it's a little bit that sort of thinking. I know very well this is not necessarily disruption, but we should be free to think and free to design what we want. Because the internet is an environment like we have it today. It wasn't there 10 years ago. And like it will be in 10 years, we have no idea. So it will continue evolving, will continue shaping our environments. And one point, or one view I clearly have, the internet is not developing in a random fashion. No, it is maybe unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. But that is not random. There are some people who decide how the future internet looks like. And Europe is not on that table when these decisions are taken. And this is maybe what we would like to do. I think Europe should have a say on the technology, and the most important technology this continent is relying on. Next slide. Now, the trends you know very well. The world inside out was the words we invented for Internet of Things. You know there will be many, many more devices. There will be many more devices being connected to the internet. And essentially everything which gets digitized will one day also become internetized. Everything gets connected. So another trend you know very well, intelligence everywhere. We see all these devices popping up in our offices or at home. You buy them and they tell you all sorts of things. There is intelligence around you, in your pocket, in devices you have bought. There is intelligence which may be local, intelligence which is a central artificial type of intelligence technologies. That's on the way in. There's a lot of talking about it, but we can assume, or safely assume, there will be a lot of development in this area. And maybe the third trend is the oldest one. Who would have believed that we can deal with so much data than we can deal with today? I would have not believed it. I have an engineering degree. I would have not believed anything I'm seeing today 20 years ago. Certainly, you could have cut off my leg, no problem. So that will continue. This data deluge we think we're living in is probably just the beginning of something which will be much bigger in the future, given artificial intelligence, given the Internet of Things taking more shape. So these are clear trends which I think many of you will agree, and they will change the environment we are operating and living in. Next slide. What you see here is a little bit the outcome of consultations we have had since September. We have done formal consultations, so there was a website, you could answer questions. We also have had numerous meetings and conversations which, with organizations and representative organizations, with multipliers. Here in Brussels, we have run workshops. And now I would say in about 10 to 12 member states. So we were really active in going out and listening to what people think about the Internet. Clear is there are quite a number of concerns, which is, now I come to that point, which is quite interesting. So there is clearly a concern about security and privacy. They are not new. They are well documented. There is a Eurostat statistic which says that 48% of the Internet users in Austria, which is the country I know quite well, have been kept from doing an online transaction last year because of security concerns. 48%, bloody hell. I mean, this is not like 5%, you know, there is always. No, this is half of it. And they reported that. We have other statistics which say that the users concerned by platforms collecting the personal data has increased from 77% to 78% in 2016. Basically, everybody is concerned with it. Everybody knows that. And everybody is unhappy with it. The question is, of course, whether we should do something. That's a different thing. But the concern is here and is well documented. This has eroded the trust in the Internet. It is not really this trustful technology. I mean, we all grown-ups, we have learned how to deal with it. So we have all sort of tricks on figuring out whether we should order something here or whether that email is genuine or whatever ways we have learned 20 years. But young people, they would have to either learn that, trust or distrust the system. So this is not so easy. There are worldwide who define what the Internet today in our pocket is. That cannot continue that way, because many of them occupy silos of certain products, of certain customer segments, of certain industries, monopolies. And I don't know if somebody, I'm not standing in a good spot here. I don't know if somebody has been looking at the news the last hour. 12:30. The European Commission has announced the fine for Google. Finally, after 7 years of investigation, conversation, and whatever the process was, the Commission has made a conclusion. Actually, the details I haven't read, to be honest. But 12:30, there was a press release, there was a press meeting, and the announcement was made that Google is going to be fined for their behavior in the search industry. You will have to go and read it yourself and make your own judgment whether this is good or bad. But we see that happening, and that has happened today. I'm not suggesting there should be more of that, but the issue is clear. Whether we want to deal, yet again, another thing. Everybody claims, particularly some of the social media, they say, you know, this is social media or the Internet is very inclusive. It isn't. It isn't. It's only inclusive for those who are included. It's not inclusive for those who are not included. So there are clear barriers in terms of price, usage, logic, and it's inclusive according to their logic. It's not inclusive to your logic. So, for instance, if you say, I don't agree to the license conditions for Facebook, well, you're excluded, obviously. You're excluded from social media. You're not only excluded from a certain product, you're excluded from using a certain medium. So that argument is also quite flawed, and we cannot necessarily assume that this will go away by itself. The digital divide festers is maybe a little bit the same argument, and very interesting, many people told us on the internet doesn't know a timeline. there is no differentiation between like 10 years ago and yesterday. It's very difficult, very, very difficult. I think many people intuitively know that when you search something, sometimes you get sort of this really old garbage, or you look for something old and you get the yesterday stuff, or it doesn't know. So in fact, this rich cultural heritage Europe has is certainly not available on the internet and findable. Perhaps it's available, but you don't get it. You can't find it. It's also something which I was surprised that people brought that up. You know, it doesn't reflect what Europe is when you go and search for something. The answers do not reflect that. Now, I have been talking a lot about the complaints, but I think it's important to also see a little bit, there are real concerns. This is nothing I'm making up. This is something which is here. This is documented very well. Now, of course, the million-euro question is, what are we going to do? I'm not claiming that we are putting in place now the grand solution for fixing all of these problems, because many of them are, or most of them are non-technical, in fact. So there will be a societal question linked to that, which turns into a policy question, which probably will eventually one day be a regulatory question. But Europe is quite a rich continent. So we do have the skills here in this place. We do have the market. So people can sell. There's a functioning European, very, very, very large market. Don't forget that a third of Google's advertising revenue are paid by Europeans, European companies. So there is a lot of money available for being grabbed. All we are probably asking is this level playing field. The level playing field as we know it in any other place. The rule of law, I think most people in this room would generally accept. Now, how come that we don't accept the rule of law in the cyberspace, in the digital space? There's you know, everything is different. No, it's not different. It's just another technology. That's it. So there are quite some opportunities, and I think now is a good time, because many people, at least when we go out and talk, and for instance, I've been talking to, just a second, 6 weeks ago, in the German Ministry of Industry, where you probably would not expect raving applause. But these people say, yes, these are real concerns. We are thinking on the same line. Yes, we have similar issues. And they gave us examples, one after the other. We say, with this company, and there, in that market, and that. So that is real. One question in the back. Please be brief.
Section of Internet. You know, all these years that we were together at Digitization, and I'm very happy that the policies we were talking 8 years ago are today spoken by you. I'm very happy. And I'm very happy that we are speaking for another Internet. I don't know what you mean human Internet, but we still support the CNET. And this is a big discussion. The question is another thing. 8 years ago, DigiConnect is on my card because it assists me to do here in Brussels what I've done the last 10 years. Something is happening in DigiConnect, which has a lot of the work we see today in Europe is coming from all the sessions of DigiConnect. We have a diminution of personnel. For example, the blockchain, we want to make a scientific research. I'm not speaking from the political. From this point of the policy issues about the scientific level, we cannot make it on DigiConnect. They direct us to join research center. Is it changing something on DigiConnect?
Of course, and that's the good bit. You know, we're not that fossilized as some people believe we are. Indeed, we have lost personnel, and I'm happy to talk about that in another conversation. You referred particularly like to blockchain, and you are being referred to that. Let me, yeah. So, because it's not exactly related to, well, it is. So we have a working group which looks into applications for blockchains in fintech industry. The Commission is going, Connect is going to announce a price on blockchains in autumn. In later part of my presentation, you will see we are creating an NGI center around distributed ledger technology. I think we do this. And actually, we want to do more. And this is something, please, well, this is web streamed, is it? I should be careful who is Okay. So if it stays in that room, it's kind of fine. Also, we are launching a joint project with the Parliament on the usage of blockchain in all sorts of industries to make it a bit more. So I think we have done a little bit the homework on our side. Blockchain is a very interesting technology. We have no idea whether it's going to really work in the end in those industries and areas where people suggest to use it. But we are quite active. And we are not referring everybody to the JRC. Indeed, the JRC is also doing something. In particular, the last project with the Parliament is carried out together with the JRC. But I would like to, if you are interested, to have that conversation afterwards as well. Now, I have been talking, and I continue in my presentation, I've been talking very much about the concerns. So what do we want to do? That question, because that's what our Director General asked as well, you know, what do you want to do? We had two answers. On the one hand, we want to continue the conversation. On the one hand, we want to continue the conversation. As I said, this is nothing I can answer like this. This will need many answers over many years. And I would continue like to listen to what people are saying, so we'll continue the conversation, we'll continue having meetings like this, changing the program, doing the right thing at any point in time. So we want to be, I wouldn't use the word agile, because the Commission, this is difficult, but we want to be flexible. We want to cater a little bit for the unpredictable. We will move the way the things go a little bit and make opportunistic decisions on the way. This is one thing. My Director General is excellent, but this doesn't mean anything. So the second part of the answer is that we want to put in place, as of autumn, so now, as of autumn, very concrete research activities where we know they are not the right ones, or there may be other right ones. But here, in my next slides, is, I think, what I will defend to the bones, because I am convinced this is not wrong. This is what many people tell us we should do, and therefore we would like to start doing it. So, in this kind of dual approach, doing something very concrete as of autumn, concrete, starting research, working with people, and at the same time having a higher level conversation, which starts sort of with policymakers at member state level and goes down to any forum who is interested to talk to us. We would like to sort of start defragmenting a little bit. We would like to start that people among themselves start having that awareness and talk to each other. Because the Commission cannot do anything. I mean, I'm not going to change the Internet. The Internet is going to be changed by the people who will work on it, who will develop the technologies, the services, who will work on the regulatory part. Those are the people who will change something. And those are the people we would like to bring together and start working for the next 10 years, and not just in a workshop from now on. In that sense, we also would like to have more stakeholders, because that Internet is not a technology. It is, I know, but the future of the Internet is not a technical question. We will need engineers, we will need researchers to develop those new functionalities, but we will need the rest of society to put it in practice and usage, including the policymakers. So there are many new stakeholders in this conversation. In the approach we have, and I will show you a little bit the approach we have come up with, we're going to mix long-term research with applied research. We want to go away from a 5-year research project and in the end maybe something comes out of it. No, a 5-month research project, and at the end comes out of minimum viable product, even if it is complete fake. But it should be something which, in very short intervals, in an agile research fashion, delivers incremental outcomes where we quickly can see, are we going in the right direction? Is this something interesting? Let's continue. If not, we scrap it. Because one of the, that's not an assumption, and I'm not sure if I should have kept it on the slide, but radical new functionalities. This is a little bit, I think, what we should look at. In 10 years, I would not be surprised if there are radical new functionalities. I can't tell you which they are. I only can tell you from the last 15 years, we have seen a lot of disruption on the Internet. And so I would rather speculate that continues. People will come up with very interesting things, very interesting technologies. All this sort of talking about the edge today, for instance, where say, you know, is that just IoT, or is that edge which includes computing, storage, and how that will change? That is something I don't know, but I imagine there's a lot of new technology coming up in that area only. And yeah, the European core values. Well, that comes back to the legal argument. I think the rule of law, as we have it anywhere in life, should also be applied in the digital world. I mean, I think that sounds obvious, but this will be hard work to enforce it. And in particular, people who work on this have to, I think they have to comply to European values. I mean, this sounds a little pathetic, I know, but those basic values, you know, we enjoy in Europe so much, privacy, security, inclusiveness, this level playing field, they're enshrined in many of our other policies, but here we seem to be more lenient, at least so far. And finally, and that's sort of the thing I like most, in fact, if after 5 or 10 years of such an initiative, I think it gives rise to a movement. It gives rise to something which is broader than just a research community or an ecosystem of innovators on the internet. It should be something broader than that. It should be people who are committed to drive the most important technology mankind has ever invented into the right direction. Next slide. And I'm coming a little bit to the end. I will probably skip that one because what you see here are sort of key words. So these are areas we have been working on to transform them into this NGI logic of being agile, human-centric, delivering something now. Some of these areas you know very well. I'm just picking one. I mean, the colleagues from IoT. So this is not the unit I'm responsible for. This is another department in our house. Or interactive technologies. This is our friends in Luxembourg, is a department over there. So these are different departments, and we are going to work together under this NGI logic. But there's one new thing, and this is what I'm showing you. The bottom thing, this Open Internet Initiative. Next slide. Next one, please. Yeah, can we show the next one, and then exactly. Now I want to come back to the other one later. So as I said, that as of autumn, we will come out with a very concrete activity where we'll launch a call and say, we want NGI centers on this and that and that. But what do I mean with an NGI center? An NGI center is center in this almost sense of bricks and mortar, is a place where a certain technology we think is really important to be researched. They take it up as button holders or as their main motivation. And we, as of autumn, we will call for three of those NGI centers. There will be one on privacy and trust enhancing technology, particularly looking at the aspect of personal data spaces which can reside on your devices, in your pockets, for instance, and don't need to be centralized. It will particularly look at the question of IDs. Can we permit that private companies act as provider of your identity and authenticate you, which normally was the government job, because they give you the ID cards and somebody asks you for an ID card, this is what you show. Can you have in the digital space private companies doing that and charging money for that? I mean, imagine like somebody issuing ID cards. You know, it's like, mine is better than the government one. You know, here, have that one in the train station. That's the one you should show. I mean, that is happening or has happened. And I'm not pointing at one company because this is what all the platform companies are jockeying for these days. They want to own you as a person, not more than a customer, as a person. And they would like to know as much as possible because then they can sell this data. And you know how much it costs? You can ask Facebook whether Peter works for the commission. You can ask, and you get an answer for 50 cents. Well, 30 to 50 cents probably. You get an answer from Facebook. Or Google, or I don't know, there are plenty of those providers. The real market is the business. So authentication is a very important element. There's the next one is, and this is what I referred to earlier, we are creating an NGI center on decentralized data governance. Distributed ledger is going to be a key technology. We kind of intuitively feel that. It is working. There are many implementations. People are trying to put that into products and services, but there are also many drawbacks. Blockchains don't scale. Maybe they don't have to scale. But if we want them scalable, we will have to change a little bit on the mathematics in there. So we'll look at the research into the shortcomings of blockchain-related technologies, for instance, in here. And the third one is discovery and identification. well, actually now I said Google was fine for search. Probably Google was not fine for search because it doesn't search. It just gives you something. You type something and it gives you something. For that, it has been fine. But I wouldn't use the word search because it's not related what you type in and what you get. So actually today you can't even find anything on the internet if you want to look for like devices or data, I mean real data. You can only find it if metadata exists and they are findable or they are registered somewhere. So it's very complicated. So we want to go back and address kind of thorny research questions on how can you actually find something? Imagine this internet of the future. I mean, would be useful if you as a person can find something. Now, different the old school. Research center hires researchers, then they do research, and then something comes out of it, mostly knowledge. No. Fund something. They are doing the real stuff, and they will fund and the nice home, which brings all of that together. But they go out and call for this few brilliant people doing different. I'm talking up to 200,000. And actually, we have mechanisms to even go beyond that. So I think there should be ideally I don't know, classic things, you know, from an accelerator. So all the kind of services. And we call for an NGI center who can provide that services to those individuals, these high-tech companies, these SMEs. Can I go back to the previous slide? Sorry, that was in, yeah. So the characteristics of how we want to do that research is very different from the classic one. And this NGI center, they should be thinking big, you know. Immediately, it's like you start now, but you have to start thinking big. This is like, if you're too slow, too linear, it's not going to work. Think different, be fast, flexible. The Commission is not stopping people from doing anything great. I would love, you know. I mean, that's it. I'm not bureaucratic, you know. If people want to do something, start. Fund startups, excellent. Let's go ahead. Now, that's a point. The real people, fund the real people. Not everybody who believes who is a driver of the internet is actually the one we're looking at. We want to look at those people who are now hungry and brilliant to drive that internet in terms of research forward. This is probably, and I'm counting myself to the older generation. I'm looking here rather for a younger generation of people. I know this is selective and it's maybe even unfair, but money doesn't stretch everywhere. So we want to go after these people who are in this shaping phase of their life where they say, I want to do something, and I know how to do it, and I have a clear idea how to do it. Those are the people we want to get on board here. Now, the other elements you can understand, like this openness or a much more visible approach to doing that sort of things. And perhaps the one element is multidisciplinarity. That's not necessarily research or research teams which are only ICT or engineers. That could be mixed research teams. That could be, you know, innovation comes today increasingly from corners where you wouldn't expect it. So you will not find that we are saying here it needs to be ICT, ICT. No, it doesn't matter. We want to fix a problem. Blockchains don't scale. Maybe the answer comes from biology. I don't know. It could, but I don't know. So we do not want to exclude that sort of thinking. Now I'm coming to the end of my introduction. So we skip the next one because we did it. Next one. Yes, that's sort of, that animation should show you. In autumn, we're launching 3. A year later, we'll launch another 3. And hopefully a year later, we will start launching the machine more and more. So step by step, we'll accumulate more of those NGI centers dealing with specific technological or research issues addressing this change of the internet we would like to effect. Next slide. I probably would skip it because the only message is we want to do that for a long time and with a lot of money. So I think this is not difficult to discover. Perhaps I'm standing alone here, but we have assembled quite an active group of people behind that already. So actually some of you here have been working very actively on moving this NGI vision forward in either a policy context like this recent NGI summit we have had in the European Parliament, or on a technology perspective, like many of you have been working on previously in FIRE activities, which is a more networking centric research you're doing. So we have assembled a number of people. We have also, now I should be careful. We are about to start a couple of support projects, which basically help the Commission in driving that initiative forward at the Europeans. My team in the Commission is not big enough in an earthquake, but if we hire the right people, I think we can actually effect something. So this is what I say here as these CSAs, these coordination and support actions. We have just 2 weeks ago selected 3 of them. They will work as of September with us, and that will immediately mean like 15 people more working full time on that, and hopefully change something. With this, next slide. I'm coming to my end. 2 minutes left, which maybe is the opportunity for a Q&A, or is that foreseen here? Yes. So I'm coming to the end. Thank you very much for listening to what I had to say, and I would be happy to get your feedback, maybe now, question now, or also later. Not difficult to reach. Thank you.
So thank you, Peter. We will take now a couple of questions, and then we move to the next sessions, especially because we have some people remotely. Please go ahead.
So one question about how the NGI centers are planned. So question was how the NGI centers are planned. Are these meant to be like in one location, or is this distributed several organizations? How is this?
Should I?
That works.
Let's do it that way. Now, when I was talking about this bricks and mortar, I was perhaps exaggerating, but the point I wanted to make is that this cannot be a consortium of like 10 partners. If you want to be efficient there, you have like these NGI centers run by 1, 2, 3 partners, 4. Or I mean, I thought that there's no limitation in that sense, but it needs to be practical. So it cannot be completely like completely virtualized over 15 organizations. It's not going to work because somebody has to deliver the actual services to those startups or to those people. I'm basing my opinion and the answer on that on experience we have made with other programs before. So we have done basically exactly the same thing in other parts of the Commission programs, and we gain quite good insight and experience from that. And that's what we want to use here as well. Small consortia.
I will ask you to introduce your name and maybe your organization when you start.
Sure. My name is Magdalena Pacholska. I'm from the Turkish Research Office. I just wonder, because you speak so excited about this money for the people, for this excellent people. For me, it's, sorry for being sarcastic, but it looks like saving on the HR cost of Google. Because as soon as you hire these people, they will be already put somehow in the spotlight for these big companies, and they don't even have to move to the US. It's enough that they go to Switzerland. So I just wonder, how will you protect these resources from being poached? Thank you.
It's a very interesting. Actually, it's the first time somebody asks that question on the NGI Center, because I have not been presenting the whole thing. We also will launch in autumn a call which relates to the US. And in that context, many people have been asking me, why do you do that sort of thing? Because it would just lead to a brain drain. Well, first, people are free to do what they do. If you're brilliant, you will succeed in any case. You will go to the US, whether I want it or not doesn't matter. So the people we want to work with, they will make their own decisions. I cannot influence it. It may well be that particularly, as you say, these people will be advertised, they will become visible, so other people will see what they are doing. That they will be more prone to be hired by the big companies or more prone to be drawn into certain ecosystems. Yes, I cannot influence that, but that's not necessarily bad. Having worked like 2 years in Silicon Valley is maybe not a bad thing. At least you know how business is run there. That business run there has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do how business is run in Europe. And the knowledge you have taken in Silicon Valley is not going to help you in Berlin. Very little, because the environment here functions differently. So in that sense, I take your argument. There is a risk. There will be people going that path, I'm certain. But to a certain extent, I can't help it, you know. And I don't even want to sort of straitjacket it. If you have a good suggestion, actually, by the way, I would be happy to hear your views on that.
So thank you. A last question I saw before somebody there. Yes.
Hi, Peter. Thanks very much for your presentation. My name is Graham from Ireland. I am the largest P2P Bitcoin trader in Europe, and I run a blockchain incubator in Cork, in Ireland. I suppose my question is just like, how are you going to protect these companies accessing bank accounts? Because it's very difficult for blockchain, I suppose, entrepreneurs to get access to bank accounts because there's a big, maybe, I don't know, like I get calls pretty much very often from my bank asking me where the money's coming from and what I'm doing with it. And I've already had one bank account closed a couple of years ago when I was working in the Council of Europe, actually, oddly enough, because I had a Bitcoin transaction on my bank account. So I know a lot of SMEs, a lot of startups in Ireland, to just being outrightly refused bank accounts if they have the word Bitcoin or blockchain in their company name. So how are you going to support, like, let's say if I apply for 200 grand, where am I going to put that 200 grand if I don't have a bank account?
It's very interesting what you tell me. Very interesting.
Bitcoin?
Say again?
Can you give it to me in Bitcoin?
I'm not sure if our accounting system is going to support that. So, no, but the point you raise, like, we want to work with people who probably are in that environment. So, and indeed, we did have, as I said, we based that on experience. We have just finished a program where we supported 1,047 startups, and many of them didn't have a bank account at the point of selection, and they had to go and create, sort of, first create a company or whatever, they had to do all the legal stuff, which was not an impediment at that stage. I would have to think about, I don't know if this, I mean, now you raise the question mark in my brain. And I'm certain to remember that when we start talking about that NGIs and whether that can be really implemented so easily as I'm talking about it right now. So to be honest, so far with the experience we have made, we didn't have to come with coffers of cash, you know. So we could make banking transactions so far. Interesting question. Thank you. I cannot answer it at that stage.
So thank you, Peter. Thanks to the audience for raising very interesting questions that will help definitely also identifying what are the challenges along the road. Now it's time to pass to the next session. I hope that Peter can stay with us. Great. So I would give the floor to Alex that presents the next session.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So in this session, we'll discuss the RTD challenges for NGI, key RTD challenges, and we have three distinguished speakers that will talk about three key areas for NGI, namely blockchain, privacy, and discovery. So I'd like to call our speakers, Mathieu Daquan, Borovic, and Axel Polaris to join me on the table here. All right. Yeah. Right, so our first speaker is Mathieu Daquin. He's professor of informatics, specialized in data analytics and semantic technologies in the Insight Center for Data Analytics at the National University of Ireland in Galway. Mathieu was until very recently with us in the Knowledge Media Institute of the Open University, so we go way back. And Mathieu is going to talk to us today about profiling information sources and discovery and services for discovery. So over to you, Mathieu.
Okay, thank you. Do I have slides?
Yes, they should be up, maybe.
Yeah, well, we're doing this. Okay. Okay. I sign you to that? Yeah. I noticed this morning when I was looking at it that the program says, my affiliation is Univ Ireland. So probably somebody talk to somebody and say, where does Mathieu come from? Ireland. Which university? Is there more than one? Well, let's say Univ Ireland. It works. Okay, so I don't necessarily have a lot to. I don't want to spend a lot of time. I think it's good to leave it for the questions. But when I was asked to talk about discovery and selection, well, the first thing I did is Google discovery and identification technology for next generation internet, and there is a nice report that says what it is supposed to be. And so I picked up a tiny bit of one of the very first paragraphs. And if you go to the next slide, that highlights one of the bit of it, which is kind of, to me, encapsulate well what is a challenge. Next slide. No? Oops, one before. Oh, that's funny. It should do something, but doesn't really matter. So, which is that, go back, that we are talking about accessing billions of heterogeneous data sources, skip the middle, in a meaningful and personalized way. And I thought that kind of shows the challenge very well, because accessing billions of data sources, well, that's the billions of data sources. They are not necessarily next generation yet at this point. They are actually there. They're already there, and there are lots of things like this. Now, the personalized and meaningful way is where the challenge is, and that particular report stayed very high level and very abstract about what that actually means. So we heard a lot about the next generation internet being about the users and from the point of view of the users, but what does it mean for a user to have access to billions of data sources and to be able to find and access them? I personally don't believe that this is the way to look at it. We need more intelligence. We need a way to introduce the intelligence into how we look at the data sources and how we actually make them accessible and how somebody might end up benefiting from them. So I thought I would take a more concrete scenario, which is not about users. Yes, in the next one, this time. Is, to me, the question, the challenge for the user internet can be summarized like this. Imagine you're a robot, and you are suddenly placed into a new environment, say this room, for this event. And you have a certain task. How do you know which data source you can use in order to achieve your task? How do you find them? How do you discover that they exist? But more importantly, once you have discovered that they exist, how do you actually use them? How do you integrate them? This is a new environment. You are not allowed to hard code any of the information. You have to use it. You have to find this. And more importantly, well, you're a robot. You have full-on sensors. How do you actually contribute to these new data sources? The idea is, you know, this next generation internet should encapsulate this idea of a data space, one in which any agent could bring in their own data and understand in a kind of emerging way how to use the data so that they can actually provide something to the users. So the current state of the technology in the next slide is kind of trying to address in a way the first question. It's coming? Yeah? It's most of the work that has been done so far has been on basically data cataloging, which is an interesting thing because what it does is taking the problem from the publisher's point of view. It's giving you a system by which you can say, my data is about this, except that this doesn't really tell my robot what it can do. It doesn't tell my robot how to use these data sets. It tells them what is the topic, who should put it there, at what time it was published, but it doesn't really tell them anything about what to do with it. So there are three areas which I think are relatively important to look at in order to achieve discoverability and identification of data sources. If you skip 2 slides. Yeah, another one. And the first one is I believe, on basically the content. One of the key questions for me is, my robot, when it gets into the room, needs to be told, these are the data sets that are available, and this is what they can do. These are the answers they can provide, and these are the questions you can ask to them. And that, to an extent, is almost already feasible. But it's not done at the time of publication, it's done at the time of analyzing the data set, or looking at it and trying to figure out what it can do. This is a very kind of basic representation of a simple work we did in the context of a smart city. We have a large number of data sets, and some of the data sets talk about some places and some organizations which have populations and ratings and things like this. And if you analyze the data set well enough, then you can figure out that you can automatically generate, say, a verbal interface for a device like an Amazon Echo, which will encapsulate the kind of questions you can ask the data set. You can ask, what is the population of this place, or what is the rating of that particular restaurant? That's brilliant. That's the kind of a starting point. You have a data set, we automatically have a way for a device to use it to do something. Except that's a bit too simple. In the sense that this is about static data sets, which are purely based on, which purely can give you facts. If I give you an example of what we should be able to achieve, you know, I have a new device here. It's I had it 3 days ago. It's kind of inside my shirt. You can see a little square here. If you looked at it, if you look at its API, it will tell you there are 2 data streams you can get from it. One is a number, generally between, say, 1,000 and 10,000 if we are lucky. And the unit is steps. That's easy. We know what that is. The other one is its unit is between 0 and 60. Sorry, its values are between 0 and 60. It updates every hour, and the unit is minutes. Now, look at that and figure out what is the question you can ask this. What does it actually mean for this device? Does anybody have any idea?
We need to look at the stream to answer the question.
Well, I tell you, the stream, so the stream for today is between 8 and 9, 23 minutes. Between 9 and 10, something like 15 minutes. Between 10 and 11, something around 21, and so on. So it's a number of minutes I have been sitting or standing straight. So as I say, the challenge for me here is, how do you get this data, and without having to hard code the semantic information that is, this is the question that particular stream can answer, how do you figure it out? How do you get an agent, a tool, to understand that there is a data stream available that can say that? How do you get a robot to figure out that there might be a data set that gives you the temperature in this room right now, and that actually gives you the temperature in this room from 2 years ago? How can you get the robot to, once it has a temperature in this room, can figure out what data sets it can use that can correlate or that can be related because there is a strong correlation with it? So all that sort of question is what we need to answer in terms of content. We need to understand what the data actually says in order for it to be discoverable, not who or when it was published. And once we know what it says, we also have to figure out, if we go forward, whether we agree with it. And again, there is always, in discussion about discoverability and identification, the question of quality. But the important question about quality, if we take our robot scenario, is if the sensor in this room says that the temperature is apparently 45, and the robot sensor says it's 23, then there is a question of how trustable and how valid the sensors there are. So this is actually a picture where we looked at graph data and where we could identify places where several data sets seem to agree, where compared to places where several data sets seem to disagree. So places where the values are in consensus and controversy. And that sort of thing will need to be made dynamic. We can't just assess the quality of a data set and its trustability at the time it's published. It needs to be assessed in live while it's going. And finally, the last one, and probably the most boring aspect, but the one that I need to mention in the next slide, is, well, if we know that data sets exist, if we know that they are answering the right question, and if we know that we agree with them and they can be trusted, the next question is, can we actually use it? Do we have the right to do so? If I want to use the data set for a commercial application, can I do that? Am I required to attribute anybody? Am I required to redistribute my results in the same way and openly? Is there a restriction on how much I can distribute the results I have and all that sort of things? And again, that might sound like completely trivial questions. The sort of thing we can just put in a nice document that says this is the policy for the distribution of this data set. But think again at the beginning, billions of data sources. We need to be able to automate this. Our robot needs to be able to ask the question, can I have the temperature of this room from 2 years ago from a source that enables me to use it in a commercial application and to redistribute it without restrictions? And who should I attribute for it? So all of that needs to be automated. And again, there are lots of research work going on right now on the representation of these policies, but also on how you reason about these policies, how you understand how these policies propagate in the way the data is being processed. So I've probably already taken more time than what I have promised. So my conclusion is, you know, in the next slide, the typical discovery and identification technologies that have been used for the past generation in the Internet, I don't believe I've been going in the right way. They are taking the point of view of the publisher of the data sources. We need to take the point of view of the consumer, and we need to look at how to analyze data, not only to understand, you know, how to predict temperature, but first to understand what it's actually meaning and what question it is competent to answer and how much it's exploitable. That's it.
All right. Thank you very much, Mathieu, for being precise but fast. I'd like to ask everyone to keep the at the end. So our next speaker is Zita Borovic. She's a blockchain and digital currency strategist and also advisor to the Minister of Digital Affairs. The floor is yours.
To this very interesting forum. Things my colleague addressed beforehand are very, very interesting, and I will refer to them in the end of my presentation. So I'm an advisor to our Minister of Digital Affairs of FinTech, Digital Distributed Ledger, and Digital Currencies. I also run a foundation which is called FinTech Powerland, and the aim of the foundation is to support development of financial and transactional innovations in our country. I'd like to go very quickly about the topic on transactional technology within the digitization. I've got only 10 or maybe 12 minutes, so it would be very superficial, but I'll try to do my best to show you how we see it and why it is important. Can we? So first of all, the difference between digitization and the digital transformation for us is that digitization is about building infrastructure. The digital transformation is more reaching the customer, so we see it as a tool for businesses. But for the state, it is digitization which is the most important part. Can we? So we believe that through this process of digitization, we create new foundation of the state, digital foundations. We treat, in data economies, if you consider that data is probably, the data-driven economy is our direction and our future. So if you consider transaction data is some kind of critical infrastructure, and transaction we consider as a way of rebuilding the relation between our citizen and also for the business side, for the strategic sectors, to rebuild the relation with clients. Because mostly citizen is a client of a public administration. So we see digital relations as transactions simply. Transaction is a process of change. So something changes and then transaction appears. So we see that in public administration there are mostly three types of transactions. It's like citizen to administration, business to administration, and citizen to business administration. And within strategic sectors, so mostly we consider them as a big companies owned by our state. It's like customer to business, business to business, and business to customer. So we all know the shortcuts, but this is important that on these levels the transactions appear, and it is important to keep in mind that we have to make change here. As we consider digitization, this is my personal view, but also I believe that we all in public administration, we should be, very, very seriously treating this. It's like building a trust to zero. Because if there is no trust, there is nothing important. So we treat digitization as a way of building trust. And trust can be divided in a number of types or flavors. So we believe that using technologies, we can rebuild the lost trust. And global financial crisis was one of the probably the recent most reasons why the trust was destroyed. So we believe that now technologies can first rebuild the lost trust, and then to build a specific new type of trust based on technology. So specific tools based on our technology we know to build this algorithmic or digital trust. And why we actually do this? Because the complexity of technology is like growing exponentially. And if something is complex, you can't manage it in a reductional way. So you can't specify the process and follow the process. It's impossible. So there is decentralization, we believe, which will help us to keep control of this very, very complex technology progress. And fintech companies are just, I would say it's a prelude of decentralization. They are not decentralized, but they decentralized, for instance, the supervision. And supervision has been struggling with catching on the decentralized financial innovations because they are not centralized. So this is, I would say, fintech is just a prelude. And then we've got all of these blockchains and DATs, which are the next step. So we believe that a public administration and the state should be looking very much, very carefully into transactional innovation, because we are in the next generation in Internet Forum, and we believe it's an Internet of value. So if you consider Internet of value, then transacting becomes a crucial part. This is how we see transactional markets, transaction markets. Then we can see the transaction divided into mostly two main parts, monetary and handshake, so where is no money exchange inside. And they have distinct effects. One of them, monetary, mostly they make up a turnover, so the monetary data, monetary streams. Which are today based on data, of course, but it's not the streams of value yet, but we are on the verge to converting them into them. And we've got these handshake transactions, which are big data, and they make up the reputation. So first, we can derive scoring from these monetary transactions, and from the handshakes, we can have a reputation. We believe that within if you consider the centralization of the next generation internet, the reputation and the scoring layers will become critical. So we expect for the whole of these protocols, like if you consider for all, automated internet, when machines interact with themselves, the native language is the protocol. So if they communicate with the protocol, then there is a room for creation and some kind of new layers for scoring and reputation. And now, because probably I'm running out of time, very quickly on our initiatives on how to address all of this transaction stuff. The next. So basically, we are preparing a strategic research program in our national research center, and it is going to be dedicated to transactional technologies with for three main parts now. It's fintech, DLT, and clearing technologies, advanced one. So I will go through through this program in the next slide. But also what is important and it's worth saying. No. Can we just very, very quickly get back? We've got some kind of blockchain and DLT and digital currency stream by our ministry. Our ministry runs a program which is dedicated to converting Poland from cash-based to cashless Poland. And there are 14 streams which are a great deal because they are social initiatives. People can join the streams and contribute for the digitization if they are interested, if they want to engage. And one is blockchain and digital currency stream, and they've been very, very active. It's like 6 people, very much engaged, and they've been putting together some kind of initial documents on how to segment the knowledge. What what are the basics? And so they do a lot of good work. And the third initiatives like Exploration Lab in our scientific computer network, which is NASC. We will go through on the next slide. Very, very much important headline state, because blockchains, we see blockchains as a market generation tool. So blockchains as a commodity, money commodity transfer, as opposite to the regular capitalist models, where money is the main objective. So money, commodity to money. So we believe state engage because state has to be responsible for creating markets, not money. So business side won't be very eager to do that because it's quite opposite their objectives. So this is how we see the crypto economy. So economy based on protocols. The main pillars are, as you can see, computer science, behaviorism, so how people deal with the technology, and cybersec. There are a couple of tools like mathematics, cryptography, data networking, game theory, and monetary theory put together. And they put together, they have to address the decentralization issues because we are not yet sure how deep we can go into decentralizing the data and what kind of data we can decentralize safely and what kind of data is not, probably not to do. Growing pains governance, as you probably all know, public chains, they struggle with the governance, so there are also some concerns about privacy. So this is our Internet of Value as we see them, and this is what we would like to address in our program. Next slide. So beneficiaries, administration, citizen, and strategic sectors. We can see there's a prototypes of transaction infrastructure. As I said, transactional data, so we would like to put together prototypes and using specific assets, taking actions for using these assets, like in research, advisory, and education. We expect to be able to prepare new regulation, to develop standards, to find out the applications, because the application is now one of the problems, how to come up with good application of existing technologies. So we believe that this program will bring us closer to the Internet of Value. And this is my last slide. We put together a smaller project because the project I've been mentioning, it's like at least 70 million Polish zloty, which translates roughly to probably 17 million euro. It might be, it might be bigger, but the initial value is like this. But also we started a smaller program, which is called some kind of Polish Internet of Value, and we will explore more depth possible application in industrial and public administration environment. We don't want to touch finance because for finance there is a specific place within the program. We would like to develop a center for regulatory technology and transactional security. And this we believe is a perfect place because they've been, I mean, the pioneers of previous internet in Poland. They are state-backed, and this component is very important. They are some kind of science and technology center focused on networks, and they are governed by our ministry. So this is our approach. And getting back to the topics you addressed, questions you asked are perfect for the research program we are putting together. Because we would like to develop big data sets. We believe DLT and blockchains are a great tool for creating high-quality data sets. They are profiled for specific types of transactions, for example, right? If you consider, I don't know, land registries or any other types of transactions registered in one place, and you can have this high-quality data, which then can be used as some kind of Swedish buffet for artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms. And then if you analyze the high-quality data sets, the output is much better than you, analyze the random data. So these questions would be perfect to answer within the framework of this program. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Magda. And our third speaker is Axel Polaris, head of the Institute for Information Business at Vienna University of Economics and Business. Over to you, Axel.
Okay. So waiting for the slide, maybe asking the question, how many of you are computer scientists here? Short show of hands. Okay. Lawyers? Okay, maybe some. Psychologists? No? User interface design? Okay, good. So we would need some more people in the room. Anyway, so let me start why I asked this question. So what I want to talk about in my presentation is technical aspects of versus innovation challenges of enabling privacy enhancing technologies. Next slide, please. So it's a contribution from several people. I can't name all of them, but maybe tell you a bit where I'm coming from. Next slide. So we founded last year in our university, which is the University of Economics. I have a computer science background, privacy and sustainable computing lab, where we try to put stakeholders together. We have people with a psychology background, we have people with a legal background there. We try to approach this from an interdisciplinary direction. So basically, we launched this with a launch event where people from standardization organizations were there, people, civil society activists, and all kinds of people trying to solve these questions around how we could ensure privacy in a future internet. Next slide, please. So, whoops. What happened there? Let me see what I can. Okay, good. So where everybody and particularly companies are probably standing like the rabbit in front of the headlights at the moment is the General Data Protection Regulation, which this was not the court decision that you were mentioned, but we probably will see some of those forthcoming. There will be much more severe consequences for violating privacy in the future, and there has been much more try to attempt to harmonize and make the regulations more crisp, more understandable regarding privacy and what companies have to do regarding privacy. So we have several projects running around this with our ministry working on a study on innovation with several partners and privacy, but also a new project. You see all the partners there. I'll talk about this a bit later on. But let's move to the next slide. So this will come into action in next May. And here I have picked up out of these 4 points, which are, in my opinion, quite relevant. These are not the only points relevant to privacy, but these are some, I think, where we can think about and discuss, hopefully, technology challenges. One is informed consent and policies. The second is transparency and deletion. The third one is subjectivity. And the fourth one, I will not go into details of that, or we are not doing particular research in that, but anonymization is the fourth one. So last but not least, for all these things, we have to ask ourselves, what are the trade-offs, or what are the challenges in terms of protection of data versus enabling innovation in Europe. So since I've been asked to keep it short, I have only this. Okay. Takes a while. The slide might come up. Consent and policy. So basically, the PR about consent is that if consent, the consent has to be freely given, and it's clearly distinguishable. Without data subjects are allowed to withdraw their consent. So as points for discussion and where enabling technology should hook in, I think, is basically not only on the technology side, but also on the understandability of giving consent. So most of us, or most models think that opt-in is the only model for consent, but there are some studies which actually say that opt-out or partial opt-out or interactive processes for gaining consent in a more fine granular manner might be better and more understandable to people. It's also that giving consent in online activities is largely related to how it is presented to the user, how user interfaces are presented, or which behavioral aspects are taken into account. So it's much easier in certain contexts to get consent than in others, and it depends on what order you put it, what information you present in between. All these things have to be researched in order to understand what actually meaning freely given and understandable consent means. So the other thing is, how can I delegate this consent? Basically, maybe if humans can't understand it, maybe actually AI and machines can help us to do that. So basically, if we have like a safety belt template of consent defined in understandable policies that protect people, then agents could maybe help us to read that our preferences regarding giving consent are respected. And in this sense, policies need to be represented in a machine-readable manner. We heard something about in your talk already about how policies can be represented regarding data licenses, but this is also important for personal data usage. Good. So then next slide is about transparency. This is very similar. What also has to be provided in terms of the general data protection regulation, which is really a good start, I think, is that basically, okay, does it go further? Is that transparency has to be guaranteed. So the data subjects have at any point the right to know and to see what happened with their data, how their data has been processed. So you should be, data providers should give concise and transparent, intelligible and easily accessible information about what happened with my personal data. And they should use explainable, clear language to deliver that. And so some suggestion is, for instance, to use standardized icons. And again, here user aspects come into play, but also agreed manners how to integrate all this information. So if you have different data providers providing your data, you might want to get an integrated view. So what technology could provide is this integrated view on what happened to your data. On the other hand, there are no standards or best practices yet for actually integrating this. There are no obligations yet for data providers to deliver this data in a standardized manner. So I think there is open questions there. Another obligation for data providers is to delete your data, the right to forgetting, whereas there are questions of what deletion actually means. So deleting data in a database is one thing, but not having this data recoverable anymore from the database is another thing. And this gets even more difficult in distributed environments in the cloud and so on. So basically, on the other hand, then there is also maybe a legal conflict there, is that if you tell people that if you want your data to be deleted, this might conflict with transparency needs to hold some records about the processing of your data. And then, of course, protocols how to change all this transparency information might relate again to things you talked about, like blockchain and so on. So how can I store how data has been processed and do that at large scale? Because if we're talking here about big data processing applications and so on. And the question is at what granularity you need to store the data and whether scalability of blockchain is valid for that, whether the transparency records need to be distributed at all, what kind of protocol is suitable for that. So the paper link I have put here on the bottom is one paper which discusses several options in this regard, not only blockchain being the only solution in my opinion. The next slide or the next topic I wanted to talk about is subjectivity in the legislation or in the interpretation of the legislation. So we don't need only technical aspects, because we will have to wait, and for some aspects we will need to wait until the courts have spoken. We have no case law for the general data protection as of yet. We have case law for the directive and the implemented laws. There will be in national legislations, even if there is a EU legislation for data protection, conflicts with other existing regulations or interpretations, like data, like rights to protection of property against right of privacy, etc. There are several cases for that. I can't go into details about that. But one thing is also a matter of subjectivity could be what understandability means, how this is interpreted. What could be countering subjectivity would be standardization, would be templated processes for policies and privacy terms, which are both machine readable and also in understandable, agreed wording for humans. And for this analysis of case law, one thing that you
Hello? Is there anybody out there?
Yes, I am.
Hi, that must be Lars Gunnar.
Yes, that must be.
I think we're the only ones in existence.
On Earth?
Oh, well, I'm just going to mute myself again and wait for the speaker to make noise.
As we will see probably, and this will open more questions, is what the national interpretations of this will do in the future, and hopefully it will be harmonized and all be harmonic, but also I think we will see how we can deal with this, and also with conflicting laws. So that's all from my side. I'm curious for remarks, inputs, and discussion.
All right, thanks very much, Axel. We're running a bit late, so we have time only for a couple of questions, maybe. Any questions, any remarks, any suggestions from you guys?
Hello, Magda, this is a question for you. I'm just interested, is the Polish government interested in making any of these cryptocurrencies legal tender to protect the consumer?
We've been working on approach on cryptocurrencies, and the question you raised in the previous round about how startups who deal with the cryptocurrencies can get a banking account. So the good news is that in Poland they are not blocked. Because there is no regulation existing, which so something when something is not forbidden, then it's probably allowed. So our startup can have a bank account. I would say on cloud.
Det här funkar inte så bra. Det funkar inte så bra det här. Ljudet försvinner ibland.
value comes from, the state will always have working on putting some kind of KYC mechanism on cryptocurrencies. We'll see if this would be anything interesting, but I would say that for now in Poland we still need some education. This is FinTech 4E, as you probably know, this educate, explore, explain, and evangelize. So there is a lot of things to do yet, and this program, strategic program, we want to keep the program in 2018. So we have half a year to get there. And one of the questions, or research questions there is digital base money, for example. So this program will allow our central bank, which is very hesitant, and as you can imagine, all central banks, federal reserves are very hesitant. So we would like you tools to be able to minimize and to manage the technology risk associated with this technology in order to develop these mechanisms. I believe that next year probably we will have some. This is all I can say for now.
Okay, we've got time for one more question. Okay, so let's move to the next session then. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks very much, speakers.
Kindly ask the next speakers to come on stage, and we will just delay a little bit and shorten our coffee break so that we give enough space also to the next speakers. It's not a good area to stay. So it is my pleasure to welcome here today 4 speakers that will contribute to animate the next session. Let me read, not to say anything wrong. We will focus on the key question: what are the socio-economic challenges for a more human internet considering progressive digitization? And we have 4 different views today. The first speaker is, I will just say, briefly the names, then maybe you can introduce yourselves. So we have Giorgio Micheletti from IBC in Italy. We have Marie-Paul Odini from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise in France. We have Fiorenza Liparini from Plus Value in the UK. And we have Manuel Noyam from Link Innovate, California or Spain, both. So it is my pleasure to give the floor, first of all, to Giorgio. We will have short interventions, and then we'd like to give the chance to people to ask for a question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Monique, and thank you for inviting me over. Steve, any slides for me? Yeah. So yes, digitization and connectivity. I chose this title because we've been hearing and we will be hearing about a lot of digitization and connectivity. We heard before Peter Faltenich was talking about the revolution in the making. So yes, this is all true, but I guess we also need to take a step back perhaps and look at the market conditions and the business perspective. In other words, what I'm going to tell you here in the next 10 minutes, it's probably something that you already know, but that you as researchers and we as a research community also, we need to take into consideration when looking at the internet on the future. So we need to consider what the market really wants, what the companies, what people really want in the end. So most of these things probably you know already, but please keep in mind this. Next. so I haven't said anything about myself and about IDC. I don't know who is familiar with this picture and with the concept of the third platform. So the concept of the third platform is a theoretical framework that was put together by IDC a couple of years ago. IDC stands for International Data Corporation. We are one of the leaders, let's say the second leader in the world when it comes to market research in the field of ICT, so information and communication technologies. 3 years ago, some colleague of mine put together this idea, or at least a conceptual framework of describing how technologies is moved over and interact with the market, talking about the third platform. The third platform because the first platform was essentially the mainframes, and that was in the 50s, in the 70s, up to the mid-80s. The second platform, I'm making a summary here, but the second platform were the PCs, personal computing, from the mid-80s onwards. And the third platform from 2010, I was going to say, until now and in the next future, of course, is given by the interaction of these four main technologies that you see at the center. So cloud computing, big data analytics, and the social media and mobility as a whole. But what we've seen in the most recent years as well is that there's not only the third platform per se, but there's also something that is accelerating, that is even putting more, I would say, pressure and momentum to the old technology evolution, which are these, what IDC calls the innovation accelerators you see above the third platform. And here we go. This is something that we've been talking over the past couple of hours, and we'll be talking this afternoon. So, okay, we mentioned obviously the Internet of Things. We mentioned the cognitive systems and artificial intelligence. Again, Peter Paternik was saying intelligence everywhere, right? We said big data, notion of data. But there's also other elements that IDC considers as innovation accelerators, so next generation security technologies, for example, augmented reality and virtual reality, and so on. So you're much more expert than myself in these elements. So the bulk of this, or at least what I'd like to say through this slide, is that all of this, the third platform technologies and the innovation accelerators, are now combining together to create a new phenomenon that we call digital transformation. So they really, the synergies about these elements here are empowering new business disruptions, and I'm going to spend a few words on this. The next slide, please. Oh, I think this is where the I think they were the old slides. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So what is can you move on, because there are a couple of animations. I think it's complete. No, sorry. Yeah, thank you. No, I changed the slides, but it's fine. So what is the digital transformation? The digital transformation is what we believe, at least in our definition, it's something that, I mean, companies and organizations of all types, of all sizes, from all industries, from all vertical markets, are now contributing to bringing on and to create by leveraging the technologies, the innovators, and the third platform technologies that we've seen in the previous slide. And it is also a continuum. It's called spectrum here, so I would say rather continuum more than a spectrum. So it starts from the left-hand side, so where you see the IT business improvements, and it ends, or at least it is now in the process of being a real digital business innovation. Why? Because it's not only something that is improving the existing products and services. So IT as an enabler, or something that, for example, improves the effectiveness of our processes, allows companies to reduce some costs, etc. But it's actually creating and making possible new products and services. I don't know if I can give some examples, but when you think of, and that's something that I think I can mention, we did some research a few months ago for a project, and we interviewed someone at the BBVA, so the big a Spanish bank, and they created, for example, a company called the BBVA Data and Analytics, where they take the data of their customers, obviously anonymized and so on, but basically they are selling these data to the retail sectors or to the transport sectors or to travel agencies, etc. Because the simple idea of taking data from your ATM, so when you withdraw the money, will tell you how many people possibly live, what is the spending capacity of these people, how many money these people are withdrawing every day or every hour, every 2 days, etc. So this is immense information, and they actually have created a business or are in the process of creating a business out of this. Now, I don't get into the technicalities, whether this is allowed or not allowed, etc., etc. But what I'm saying first that I wanted to show you is the idea of analyzing the digital transformation from a, I would say, from an evolution perspective. So IDC analysts have divided the process of or the stage of digital transformation around these 5 stages. Obviously, the digital resistor is the one that is more conservative, and digital disruptor is the one that embraces digital transformation. What you can see now here are the 2015 numbers, but if you click again, please. These are the 2017 numbers. So the curve, the classic distribution, moves rightwards, and what I'd like to point at your attention is that the digital players are increasing, so those who have a quite decent level of maturity when it comes to digital transformations, to the detriment of the digital explorers, so who are just attempting. So they are, obviously there is an improvement there, but the digital transformers, so even the more advanced stage, is clearly making progress. Another element to consider, however, and this is something that also relates to the beginning of this session, is the digital resistor. Look at the left-hand side. So even in 2017, they slightly increased, namely there is resistance. So again, we are not in the Silicon Valley here, so we are in Europe. I think I would no, next slide, please. Yeah, I would skip that one because these were some of our predictions, but I think we don't have the time. And again, another quick aperçu of just some of the results that we found that I think I wanted to show you because are interesting is by whom is digital transformation led? Because this is important to let you know what is really behind this. In 2015, if the question were, okay, who's leading your digital business transformation in your company, then the big leader was the IT director, IT manager. So in other words, is the technical guys, so the IT department. Can you click again, please? Yeah, and the CEO was just a good last. Click again. Only less than 2%. Where the respondent saying that the CEO was actually leading the digital transformation. If you go to the next slide, click again, please. So look at where the CEO is. So now, in less than 2 years, the majority of companies are saying that their digital transformation processes are being led by the CEO. So it's no longer the technical guy, it's no longer a small unit who is behind this process. It's the boss who has the strategic vision of the whole company who wants to bring forward the digital transformation. So, yeah, this is there. I'm finished. I think. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure who's next. I think it's you. It should be ladies first, but we are all the way around. So yes.
All right. Okay, so in my presentation we are going to go a bit fast, so if you can stay with me and every time I say next you click, we are going to be on time. So I'm Manuel Noya, I'm one of the founders and CEO of Linknovate. We are a startup And when Monique told me about this meeting, we decided to see what data is telling us and what we could show doing a quick analysis using our own tool, our own portal. So first of all, I want to share our vision of the world, which is next. This one. This is how we see the world in the future. So this is one of the websites of the main banks in the US, Wells Fargo, and these are all the small experiments and disruptors that are trying to tear apart segment by segment their business. And we think this is happening in fintech, but it's also happening in retail, it's happening in energy, it's happening in automotive, Centric Internet. You can see a small number of grants, a small number of big grants per year, and now the amount has actually increased in 2017 already. Next slide, please. Taking a closer look only at the European grants, we see that actually these trends or this data confirms. Next. These are some of the relevant players. Not surprising to see Fraunhofer there with 3 grants. You can see other universities like Cambridge or Genoa. And we still have this pretty much the same graph. When you look only at grant data, you could see that, again, small, medium enterprises dominate over the work and activity that is being done. Sure. They are dominating over the work that is being done in universities and research centers. And it also is true that they are gaining prominence in the last 3-5 years. So it seems that this trend is still valid when looking only at EU grants. Next. Also for the country breakdown, we will see UK, and then Italy, Spain, and Germany, mostly supported by the SME activity. It's interesting to see Southern Europe there, like Italy, Spain, and Greece a little bit below. Next. And taking an even deeper look at human-centric Internet of Things. So not human-centric Internet, but human-centric Internet of Things. Okay. Go. This is the list of key players. You can see University of Cantabria, the Digital Catapult, the UK institution, Manchester Metropolitan University, much smaller number of grants, of course. Next. This is the social graph for one of the most relevant nodes. So actually, one thing is when you look at their activity and their number of documents in a field. Another thing is when you look at their centrality of their node. So how they are connected to other nodes. And University of Cantabria is one of the few that is actually able to connect isolated nodes. So that's why it's especially a relevant player so far. Next. Again, this still holds true. So something's going on there. Next. When you look at the country breakdown, still the top 3 players, Spain, Italy, and UK, and now Spain and Italy ahead of UK. Next one, we're getting to the end. Here we did just a summary of some of the most relevant grants that we identified in this human-centric Internet of Things. You can see Sociotal, coordinated by Surrey, Decode, InLife. Next. Manutelligence, Synchronicity, led by Aarhus University. Proactive, these are some of the most relevant grants that we have seen. And finally, we did a very, it's just an experiment for you to think about. We did some data mining over this data set, and we got the most relevant keywords for these documents per year. The final slide. Oh, one more. So you can see, analyzing year by year, when the number of documents is enough to make this analysis, which is not in all the years, but you can see what the human-centric Internet of Things relate to in terms of most important or most repeated keywords. It seems that in 2012 we were pretty concerned about terrorist prevention, terrorist domain, terrorist actions, while in 2013 suddenly it's more about encourage citizen participation, empower citizens, real-world communities, simplifying complex stuff. And now in 2016, protecting privacy, privacy-preserving qualities, and so on, that we have just heard half an hour ago. And in 2017, it seems that interoperability and synchronization and being able to share data is some of the most relevant keywords that we can see here. So this is what data has told us, and I wanted to share with you. If you are interested to talk to me, I'll be around later on. Thank you.
Hi, Fiorenza Liparini. I'm Director of Research at Plus Value, which is a consultancy and research company based in London. We research and consult about new models of delivery and funding of public goods. My angle is basically social digital innovation. I'm supposed to talk about engaging policymakers and citizens into building a human-centric internet. I have just one slide for policymakers. Next, please. Well, you have listened to Peter. It's not particularly difficult to engage European policymakers. They are already engaged. They are really committed to building a human-centered next-generation internet. There is a lot of expertise in the Commission, in the Parliament. I know a bit less about the Council, honestly. I can vouch for Commission and Parliament. And there is a lot of openness towards involving different stakeholders. Just two things I like to point out, because to me they seem very different compared to what we had, let's say, 10 years ago when we were preparing the digital agenda, the current framework program. It was all about market, digital single market, the economy, research and innovation, but more on the knowledge transfer side. While now what I see, economy and society, social and economic politics, are two sides of the same coin, and digital is gone totally transversal. It's not longer limited to DigiConnect and JRC. It's really at the core of all the programs, policies that we have at European levels, which in my view is extremely important. And also there is a direct link, a link which is very present in the latest publication, including the white paper, the Younger white paper on the future of Europe, between tackling the digital transformation and ensuring that our welfare systems will be able to stay as we know them, or even better than we know them, in a very disrupted future. Next slide. What about citizens? So if you want to build a next generation internet which is really human-centered, you need to know what citizens think, want, fear, and you really need to know if they are aware of the importance of these issues. We run a project research, so we had a massive media campaign with 9 European newspapers publishing for 3 weeks 3 articles online linking to 3 surveys on these subjects. And then we ran a network and sentiment analysis from November to April, and we scanned more or less 650,000 messages from over 350,000 people on major social media. So two very different approach to try and understand what people thought. So the first thing is people are not that interested into next generation internet technologies and their impact on society and economies. If you look at the first images, the green zone is conversation about football, and the central zone is conversation about internet technologies and their impact, so that's the Russian. But most importantly and most worryingly, women and young people are not talking about these things at all. So there are no women and people under 21 years of age which are really looking into these topics, answering to surveys online, reading articles online, having conversation on social media about this stuff. And I think that's a very important policy indicators. We won't be able to build a human-centered internet if we don't get people like women and young people into the conversation. Next slide, please. What are people talking about? And here I'm looking at the network and sentiment analysis. Well, we already say that it's all about Internet of Things, security, privacy, increasingly blockchain. That's not evident from the tax cloud, but it was evident from the network analysis. FinTech is the most central node in the network. So everybody who is working in the internet is working around FinTech, privacy, security, net neutrality, a bit more fragmented, but still important. That's the sentiment, nervous. People are very apprehensive around these topics. They see great opportunities, both in business terms, but also in societal impact terms. But they're also very, apprehensive, concerned, and they are finding to seek informations and different points of view over the internet on these subjects. Next. So, because the conversations are kind of passionate, but also polarized and very discussive as a tone, what we can infer is that the opportunities also from a business side are where concerns and preoccupations are. So mainly when people talk about starting a business or improving the working positions, are talking about privacy-aware systems or security-aware systems, and particularly cloud solutions which are Europeans and which are compliant with our regulations and also our understanding of the importance of privacy and security. And those are two examples, but the other are customer support services using virtual reality. This is going to be big, apparently, given our analysis. And then, of course, it's about automation of jobs and how can we cope with it. And there is a very interesting dichotomy when we talk about public institutions. So on one hand, people are kind of very worried about the fact that governments are colluded with big tech companies. I think after today, that's like a decision, this concern is going to be less important, maybe, in Europe. On the other hand, they are terrified of being manipulated. So all the recent events like Brexit, the states' elections, have turned down to put people in a very uncomfortable position. They are asking about, are we voting with our heads? Are we being manipulated? How can we get to know what's happening? And this in some way means big data is bad, AI is bad, machine learning is bad, so there is a need to tackle a bit this pessimism. On the other hand, there is a clear ask, particularly for European institutes, to vouch, protect our values, so our concern for privacy and security. And there is a certain degree of confidence in the European Union is the right way, the right place to be if we want to build really a human-centered internet, which is in line with what the internet has been so far and what is increasingly less so in the States. And yeah, that's it. Can I add just one slide, just one thing? Education and skills are not part of the conversation. So in all the expert groups, that was the first concerns. For policymakers, that's the main concerns. Skills, education are fundamental. People are not really talking about that on social network. And the next slide. And when we ask them directly what's important and what's not, education is the less important things just before funding startups. So we have a problem here with awareness about the importance of digital skills. That's it.
Thank you. So my turn. I'll speak on behalf of the industry, so as an industry player, but also as vice chair of a standardization group that is defining the standardization for telco networks for virtualization. So my talk is a bit technical, maybe. I mean, at least based on a technical background. I don't know how many people know about virtualization, for instance. Nobody? Yeah. No, I was wondering who is aware of virtualization? Who knows about virtualization? Most people. Okay. Okay. Good. So, maybe I'll take a slightly different angle than what was said a bit earlier. Starting from the fact that for about a year or a bit more, the United Nations have taken this resolution that actually internet access is the basic human right. And so with that in mind, I mean, definitely internet, and now the big question is how can we sustain that? How can we sustain to get, to give access to more and more people, which are using it more and more intensively? And so the main challenge today of people making this internet work is to really make it accessible for everyone. And that's where, this standard and open source play comes as in the picture. And so if we move to the following slide, you can go next and next. Yeah, but the thing is with this now statement of having the internet for everyone, we have technology which is getting embedded everywhere, and you all face that with, with your car, with your watch, your mobile, and so on, and so everyone and everything is now being connected, and we know that, and so everything also will be understood. So everything becomes data, and the internet becomes very data and context centric. So it's not just the data, but it's also the data attached more and more to humans and to usage and to the context. If you move to the next slide. And so to be able to deliver that to all these different devices and so on, the access becomes more and more heterogeneous. So it's mobile, it's fixed, it's in the car and so on, different type of even Wi-Fi or some non-regulated type of radio access spectrum and so on. The other thing is that to get to the different devices or to the people with good latency. I mean, we very limited time between the time people want to access the data and when they get the data. So very low latency. You need to get this data as close as possible to the user or to the device. And so this is what brings this notion of edge. And so the edge becomes more and more important, which is driving a major re-architecture of the network and of the internet. And then you need to provide all the services and the management of this very dynamic environment. And so everything which is IT, and I'll come to that with virtualization and so on, so some of the aspects of managing the infrastructure and the services that go with it and managing the dynamic aspect of the internet are becoming also very important. If you move to the next slide. So what are we talking about? So if we talk about the internet, we are talking about these different networks which are connected to each other with peering agreement. That is a set of tier 1 networks with people that own the fiber, own the network, people like level 3 and so on. Then a number of operators which also interop with each other, a number of research networks, and all of that needs to work with each other, so to interconnect. So interoperability is becoming very critical, and being able to deliver end-to-end services with very good quality, with high performance, with lots of traffic is also becoming very important. And with all these aspects that we've mentioned earlier, so getting access to heterogeneous device with high bandwidth, low latency, and still being secure and evolving to more and more bandwidth and evolving to this 5G that we are now shaping. So if you move to the next slide, what does that mean in terms of the structure of a network? There is a real re-engineering of the structure of a network with 5G bringing all these different aspects together to a common end-to-end IP network. So with heterogeneous access, with fixed mobile and so on, all the different access technologies, with a programmatic dynamic topology, knowing that at a given time a car can be an access point or can be an end user. So this topology is, I mean, topology, I don't know if I'm being clear, but the structure of the network, the way it's seen from the management platform to be able to deliver the service is very dynamic. And then you need also to have lots of intelligence and analysis to be able to understand, you know, what are the different requests and applications being requested. And that is driving what we call being NFV, so this virtualization of the network, considering a pool of resources and deploying applications. So why I'm talking about all of that, if you move to the next slide, it's that it's driving a whole bunch of new technologies. And these new technologies, they need to be designed and implemented. And if you move to the next slide, there is a journey towards that. And it's been, I mean, it's evolving, continuous evolution. And lately, we've seen an acceleration of combination of new standards for virtualization, for IoT, but also open source communities building up to implement some of these reference implementation and to have implementations of these new technologies. And we also see some players like Google and so on joining this effort, which is new. I mean, in the past, they were using proprietary technology and not really joining this effort. And so what that means is that now there is really lots of interoperability and interconnections between all these different communities. So the open source communities, which is very much driven by the research industry. The European Commission has been, you know, very influential, funding lots of projects producing open source code. But it's also driven by some of the vendors, which are bringing this open source to bring implementation and to speed up a bit also the standardization aspects. I'll come to that next. And to shape this 5G network that we are building. If you move to the next slide. So if we look at the picture of the players, so even though there's a number of startup companies or research entities that are working on these topics, they're helping probably to advance some topics. But at the end of the day, in terms of the actual impact on the internet, in terms of implementation, on who is actually contributing to the deployment of these new technologies, we see that it's a handful of big players that are shaping through the standards, through the open source, through distribution of its open source, through productized solutions. If you move to the next slide. And it's the same also in IoT. So if we look at IoT, there's a whole bunch of standards, a whole bunch of open source, and it makes it very, very complex. So the point I want to make here is that it's one thing to do innovation, and we're all trying to fuel, you know, innovation. So innovation with startups, innovation with academics, and so on. The European Commission has been very active to do that. But the concern, and maybe it's a personal concern, but I think it's also a concern in, I mean, the industry of people, you know, trying to make this internet work, is that to make something that is viable and that is keeping up with you know, the traffic, with the performance requirements that are being asked and so on, you really need to have solid and robust solutions. And to be able to do that, you need to have this productization and this industry kind of expertise that is in the hands of a handful of people, of companies, I would say. And so I think if we want to do something at the European level and with the European Commission, this is probably a topic to work on, to try to see how we can help our startup companies, our research communities to have a stronger impact on the industry, on the makeup of this internet, of the live internet. So that is a bit one of the things I wanted to mention there. If you move to the next slide. So that was for IoT, and for NFV, which is a topic that I've been focusing on for like 3 or 4 years now, we have a bit the same. So the standards has been defining a bit the frame. So it's defining a bit the working model for anybody to work on and to develop solutions. And it's a pretty slow process, but at the end of the day, it's really something that is guaranteeing interoperability, because it defines at the end the protocols and the APIs to which everybody can comply to interop. So it makes the world open for anyone to succeed, to make something that is interoperable and that could be deployed. So it's also a good way for, you know, enabling this open source community to write code and to be able to contribute to this internet standard model. Except that, as I've said earlier, there's more and more open source. And so it's more and more complicated for people that have the responsibility to make this internet work, like the tier 1 operators, the communication service provider, the ISPs, and so on. To make it work, they need to have something, again, which is robust and so on. So there is consolidation of some open source communities, like OpenAV, NAV Space is one of them, that is consolidating pieces of the most robust critical components, and then asking some vendors, or I mean typically vendors or people in the large community, to test, to validate, to try to make these components robust enough so that they can be deployed and they can sustain the internet traffic. But still, I mean, again, we are facing this difficulty to have the small players to be effective doing that. And we end up with a handful of companies, again, controlling this piece of software and these solutions that support the internet we have today. If you move to the next slide. And so that's basically a summary, and I won't go into the details of the challenge of you know, having standards which is slow and so on, but still of the guarantee to have an open model which enable anybody to comply to the APIs and the protocols that are standardized for interoperability. And at the same time, the open source that is here normally to help with that, so it's kind of complementary, but which is bringing to the market so many pieces of code and so on, that it's very difficult to get this into production without having a few big players to own that and to deliver something that is deployable. So at the end of the day, you know, the open source needs to be productized, more or less, to be effective. If we move to the next slide. So that was a bit to talk about, you know, what makes the internet what it is today. Then on top of that, what the user sees is not the infrastructure that the operators are deploying. What the user sees is the services that are running on top of that. And what we know, and we've mentioned that many times already today, is that the services, 60–70% of the traffic today is in the hands of the GAFA plus Netflix. I mean, a few other players. So what I just said is that the internet is built with a few players, being vendors or being open source distributors. And then the services are being controlled by a handful of players again, which deliver these services that we know with the Google, the Amazon, the Facebook, and so on, and Apple, which control either the device or we control some services with traffic with HTTPS, which is encryption. So with traffic, which 80% or more now is becoming encrypted. So with no possibility for the operators to have visibility on the content, for no possibility for the government to have visibility on the traffic. So now we know that, you know, that's a big concern. One of the things that is now being quite critical is safety, is security, and so now government are trying to break that and to force lawful intercept, but also hacking the encryptions and so on to be able to have better control on the internet. So at the end of the day, we end up with an internet which is in the hands of a few people, an internet which, thanks to a resolution, is supposed to be now a human right, with something that everybody wants to be safe and secure, but something which is less and less private, which is now under control of a few players, as I've said, or under control of a few, of governments, as we see on this picture, where the internet is less and less free, actually. Even though we are trying to show that it's free internet, even the green, I think green is for free, even the green countries that we see here, we all know, you know, with NSA, with ANSI in France, and with many other government entities monitoring the internet, that we are not so much into a free space anymore. And if you move to the next slide, I think if the European Commission wants to also think about something, it's a good thing to have this resolution for internet for being a human right. But we should probably have another resolution for having being disconnected or disconnect from the internet, having privacy, being also a human right, and being applicated. I don't know how you say that, but being enforced so that people can have their privacy and this free internet.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the whole panel, actually, very interesting presentation. So from the right of being disconnected to the right of being well educated, many interesting points were touched. I would like to give the floor to two quick questions before we pass to the next one. Quick, very quick.
Thank you very much. You are speaking for human internet. Human internet is a little bit difficult for me to understand what does mean human internet, or when we understand the artificial intelligence, the reproduction of the codes by the machines, by their own, with the algorithms they have, which we didn't discuss, of course, here, but this is a reality, maybe in the beginning. So we have a machine, humans, when you are talking about human internet. Of course, the CNET, which I'm proposing all these years, yet is not implemented here, but the Persians, the Iranians, and the Russians are experimenting to their protocols and to endpoints, because at the end of the day, we have two data centers. One is on the East Coast, the other is on the West Coast. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone that wants to comment on the...
I would like to say that... Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I would like to say that I guess the definition, the way I see it, the definition of human-centric internet, because you keep asking yourself, what is human-centric internet? What does that even mean? I think that definition evolves with time. And you can saw that in a simple experiment with the keywords taken from a relevant data set. So in 2012, human-centric internet, it was about protecting us from terrorism, cyber terrorism. In 2013, it was about citizen empowerment and making it simple for citizens to participate. In 2016, it's about privacy issues. And in 2017, it seems that it's about interoperability.
if I can add to that, and I'm absolutely in line with your answer, I think that the real meaning, and Peter, I'm going to involve you in this conversation because you are the depository of a human-centered internet right now, is an internet which develops starting from what are understood to be the main concerns of humans, and develops in line or trying to address and answer as best as we can those concerns. So I think that's the thing. It's something which questions itself over and over, trying to be aware and to keep humans at the center. I think that's the best definition I can find. And on AI, in my view, the point is making sure that humans still understand why AI take decisions a certain way. So.
Okay, thank you very much. We take a 10 minutes break. There's food down there, there's coffee, so help yourself, and in 10 minutes we start. Thank you very much.
Okay, so welcome to the third session of the Digital Innovation Networks Forum. My name is Michael Boniface. I'm Technical Director of the IT Innovation Centre at the University of Southampton. I'm here representing the FIRE study and a co-author of the white paper which we distributed prior to the event. And in this third session, we're going to be looking at how the process of innovation needs to change as a consequence of all of the digitization and connectivity we've been hearing about in the previous sessions. So we have 5 presentations, and through a feat of technology, we've managed to get everyone here today from around the world. So we have from the US, the UK, and Suji here from Spain, who's going to bring their ideas about how the innovation process needs to change. So first of all, I'd like to hand over to Lars Gunnar Madsen. Lars Gunnar is a professor at the Mistra Center for Sustainable Markets at Stockholm School of Economics. And Lars Gunnar is going to talk to us or give his thoughts about digital innovation for sustainable development. So I'm handing over to Lars.
Okay, thank you very much. It's the first time on this type of webinar, so it's a great opportunity, I think, to learn a little bit. I have a different background from most of you, I think. My background is a professor of business, specializing in market dynamics, I would say distribution, technical development in the market sense, markets as networks. And I have been very much interested lately in sustainable development, and I'm then attached as a researcher at the new Center for Sustainable Markets at Stockholm School of Economics. So I choose my pitch here, Digital Innovation for. So what is digital innovation for? For sustainable development, sustainability to be prioritized for me then. It's a subtitle for this is interaction between policy practice and market practices for service innovation. So service innovation is very central here. It's an interaction between policy practice and market practices. So this is what I'm going to talk about, and I already spent, I think, one of my precious minutes here. So I will go to the next slide, which I have and you don't have. And that is these 2 megatrends. I think digitization and sustainable development are 2 megatrends, at least concerns for sustainable development. And as we all know, just to take it, digitization is connectivity, Internet of Things, big data and platforms. And in fact, I have written a little bit about connectivity in terms of markets as networks, Internet of Things, a paper, and a little bit about platforms, but not much. You know enormously much more than I do about these things. But sustainable development, that is an interesting aspect of what digital innovation could be for. I mean, we have the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Agenda 2030. And if we then believe that digitization enables service innovation and service innovation promotes sustainable development, then I think we have a nice connection between these concepts. And policies and markets, and I would say, also interact in innovation processes. And I think we know that not only from the digitization area, but also in all other areas. So all these 17 sustainable development goals are in play, I think. Climate, healthcare, consumption, production, innovation, energy, etc. And the policy practice then, and I will stress policy practice, it's not only what is being done by governments or by in these types of public aspects, there are also public and private aspects of policy practices. Supposedly then they focus on sustainable development, and then of course we have a role of politics that might be also very important in, or is important. But we have public and private practice, policy practices, we have multi-stakeholder initiatives, civil society, NGOs, all these kinds of organization units that are formed then to take these policy practice initiatives. Some of them are related to economic and legal aspects, but there are voluntary public procurements. And recently I found also that the concept of nudging is coming more and more into forefront. So policy practice in this sense is a very wide aspect of what different types of aspects in terms of trying to influence market practice. And to influence, of course, also the types of innovations that can be dealt with and can be developed basically from an interaction with market practice and policy practice. And what I have been very much seen when looking at dynamics of market networks is that this development of digitization and digitization innovation changes very much the market networks. We have, of course, the convergences, the role of data and information. There is much more centered now for user and customer-centric aspects. We have new intermediaries, and the position of companies in these market networks that are developing and using these kinds of innovations, service innovations, are all the time changing and very uncertain for the companies what the development will be. The new intermediaries might acquire a lot of power, of course, and they are also under the influence from policymakers, of course. A very important aspect here is entrepreneurship in market practice, and cooperation and competition is interacting very much as well. As it is in all markets, is very much focused on competition in many of the strategic literature and also in law against competition laws, but also cooperation we have found is very central to the functioning and the performance of market when we see what market practice is actually doing. What seems to be very, very important now, even more than before, is the business model aspect. The business model in market practice is something which has very, very high on the agenda because there are so much in the dynamics where the role and position of firms are not yet settled, and there is a lot of experiments that are going on, and these experiments are an interaction between these technology aspects and the market practice aspects. And these experiments and the business models are actually also very instrumental in as market shaping forces and market shaping devices. I have been studying together with some colleagues the mobile phone as a market shaping device, which is very interesting to see how the mobile phone might then be one of the platforms that can be important or is important for service innovation, service bundling, and so on. So what I would like to say here in the half a minute I have left is that the interaction between policy practice and market practice for this idea about digital innovation for sustainable development is very important. And I think there is a lot of what has been said today and will be said, of course, of research and so on has been that is a little bit aspect of that, but this we need to do more about that, and I would say that it's a need for more disciplinary, not only interdisciplinary research, but transdisciplinary research, that different disciplines are actually working together on with practice actors and with market actors to understand what is going on in terms of the further innovation for sustainable development, and we have a lot of examples of such that we should go further on, I think, to study, like public-private experiments, the aspect between nudging and consumption, the legal aspect of cooperation and competition, legal aspect of who owns data, etc. And we have many examples going on in terms of these different types of sustainable development issues. So that was what I was trying to do without any help of any slides that you can see.
Thank you very much, Lars Gunnar. Some very interesting points about practice orientation, certainly entrepreneurial practice orientation, and possible future market-changing devices. What is going to be next after the mobile phone? So now we're going to take questions towards the end, so we'll let each participant speak. Now I'd like to hand over to Jonathan Cave. Jonathan Cave is at the University of Warwick. He's also the economist member of the Regulatory Policy Committee at the UK. Jonathan's going to tell us a few words on his thoughts on digitized evidence bases are themselves innovation platforms. So handing over to you.
Okay, thank you. I hope I can be heard. Previous things have sort of gone in and out. Okay, for me, part of the starting point is in the nature of the innovation processes themselves and what digitization does for that. Particularly for researchers, the ability to share data and share models is an important part of how at least the invention aspect of innovation takes place. And in that respect, different conventions and norms, as well as contractual and market-orientated or institutional controls on access to data and models and the chance to create new ones, and the ownership or the governance of those models have been absolutely critical, whether it's a matter of intellectual property or patenting or simply the conventions of good scholarship and scientific discipline. Digitization by itself produces a kind of asynchronicity. You don't have to be in the same place, and the collaboration can take place often across many years, providing there is a record of what has been done. It also means that you don't have to be in the same place, nor do you have to communicate in the usual formal methods, whether they are letters or journal publications. And that means that the network structure, harking back to the discussion in a previous session, the network structure of innovation itself can be changed. There have been studies, bibliometric studies, for example, of who connects to whom, that find that in certain circumstances, disciplines, at least at certain times, form small worlds with a high degree of clustering and short path lengths. And changes in these structures determine the extent to which ideas are mulled over before they are put into practice, and the extent to which evidence flows back from practice to the next generation. Now, the particular point I wanted to address, I mean, any such talk within a short period of time is going to be kind of a list of bullet points, each of which should be properly discussed. But I did want to concentrate in particular, as Michael suggested, on this notion of an evidence base, because in relation to the next generation internet, both in terms of its end structure and the transition to it, we will need to consider the evidence base not just as a means of giving consistency and restoring the scientific method to a process of innovation that's often been more about the next big thing than a sustainable or worthwhile advance, but also to be able to take into account the shaping influence of some of the initiatives that are taking place, like the new Open Scientific Cloud, or things as soft as the emergence of data science or responsible research and innovation. So if we take this notion of an evidence base, the key point is that it is itself a platform for innovation, that by sharing data and sharing models, we can interact with each other, identify new ideas, and evaluate past ideas. Now, this set of new interactions allows us to build, curate, and exploit an evidence base, these next generation internets. And that evidence base can support at least 4 modes of innovative advance. The classic one is theoretical. We look at the literature, we look at various things, we test the models and hypotheses, and we develop new models, and then eventually we might translate them into practice. But there are also three that have to do directly with the data themselves. The first, which I as an economist am used to because it is the meat and drink of econometrics, is empirical. You look at the world, you make observations of the world, and you put those observations into the models. We can now measure the world much more. Big data and large-scale sensors provide an absolute flood of data, but they require us to remember that what we see about the world is not what the world actually is. It's the stuff we thought to measure and write down. In other words, there's a big endogeneity problem. If something seems significant, then you will measure it. So the sense in which we are being scientific is strictly limited. You only look at the world in terms of what you thought was significant. The measurement comes from the same place as the theory. Now, in many cases, the kinds of things we're dealing with are very, very complicated. Too complicated for theory and too difficult to observe in all of their details. And so therefore, we increasingly have recourse, particularly in network environments, to simulation. In other words, if there are things you don't know, you build a model of what the world would look like for various realizations of them, and you try them all out. And because simulations themselves are very complex and involve a lot of different domains of knowledge, putting together a simulation already creates a kind of platform. It draws people into conversations with each other that they might otherwise never have. And the next step on from that is the experimental one. And where we bump up against policy, so for example, if I think about the new instruments that came with Horizon 2020, or the ones that are now being planned for FP9, they do look at new topics, but they are themselves experiments in innovation. And with any such natural experiment, the value comes to sort of look at all that's happening and try to develop ways of understanding it. This means that we can do both hard innovation of a technological nature, but also soft innovation in the form of new ways to connect with each other, new ways to collaborate with each other, and new ways to negotiate the course of an innovation. And I mention collaboration in particular because Lars Gunnar mentioned the very interesting fact that competition and collaboration and collusion are now being used in different ways. One of the difficulties we've had with traditional networking forms of digital innovation is that you can't separate competition from collaboration. You can measure co-authorship and things like that, but if you have an argument with somebody, if you have a strong disagreement, and that disagreement shapes the work of each of you, it's not quite so easy to identify how that interaction plays out. But if we have a platform which is concrete, contains data, analytic methods, and let's call it unstructured experience, it becomes much easier to get hold of that. And so to conclude, I think that up till now, in particular, collaborative innovation and research has been hampered by a bunch of factors, which include IPR restrictions, especially those on underlying data and models. In the sciences, if you collect data, you make use of them to write one article, but you're going to need them for further articles and applications, so you do tend to keep them as close as possible, unless forced open by funding mechanisms. As far as the funding mechanisms go, they create a kind of prior restraint as to what can be done with the results of science, as do rules relating to things like privacy and security. There are also career incentives. Career incentives may encourage us to be precautionary or to take real options sort of future benefits into account when we think about sharing our evidence or sharing our ideas with other people. There is also a tension between the chance to collect evidence and the purposes for which it was collected. We did a big research project on contagious animal disease, and it was the vets, the people studying the epidemiology and etiology of the diseases, who were able to collect the evidence that would have been useful to understand the economic incentives and how that affected the course of the disease. But of course, they didn't necessarily know that. The richer connections that digital innovation and digital platforms allow will help us to sort of optimize those connections. And then the final part is this sort of desire generally to encourage networking and collaboration, which is frustrated in the political domain by the fact that it's very hard to get concrete attributions of impact evidence to the methods of support. The net result is not that we don't innovate, not that we don't generate new patterns and lots of articles, but the really deep or disruptive forms of innovation, or the feedbacks not just from the science to the real world, but back from the real world to the science, are often frustrated. And the hope is that with suitable platforms and suitable norms and legal and regulatory structures, we can overcome that and unleash a kind of innovation in which competition and collaboration are merely the ways in which we interact and don't define the final outcomes. Okay, that's me done.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. A lot of words, a lot of talk. Very interesting to understand how data itself can provide an evidence base for collaboration.
We can't hear you.
Oh, we can. Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, so I had some slides prepared that are not working, so I'll talk through what was on the slides initially. So I'm a researcher at Nesta. Apologies, I can't be there in person, so slides. But rather than talking today about sort of using digitization for the innovation process more broadly, I'll be talking more about innovation on the internet itself and how we should transform those, sort of how innovation currently happens to be more inclusive and more dynamic, and then perhaps also help sustain social innovation models specifically. And I'll talk a little bit also about how internet technology could perhaps help with that, or emerging technologies. So to give you some very quick context about Nesta, so we are an organization, a foundation based in London. We do a lot of work on promoting social innovation specifically, so both through funding and giving out grants, as well as through doing research. And we've recently been doing a lot of work on social innovation in digital space, or digital social innovation. And I had a map in my slide showing sort of like Europe and where all the digital social innovation activity happens. And we've been trying to map those processes, and in the process we've learned a lot about sort of the problems with currently funding digital social innovation. Like these initiatives that are competing with very large sort of existing incumbents have a lot of trouble with generating funding, etc. But there's one specific thing I'd like to focus on today, and that is sort of how we can think about alternative business models to help digital social innovation flourish, as well as smaller innovations in a landscape that's increasingly centralizing. So it's a little bit different. So when Nesta does work on social innovation or digital social innovation, we think about two things specifically. So that is promoting these alternative business models and helping sort of like social innovation initiatives with like sort of the flourish online, for example, through fostering connections between them. So we noticed that it's very effective if you help people build networks and communicate with each other, especially since we still see that a lot of these initiatives don't operate too well Europe-wide. So maybe like they'll be in the UK and you're only talking to other UK organizations, so they probably should be talking with like-minded places in Italy as well. And we help people improve their digital skills, because when we think about digital social innovation, you really see two kinds. It's innovation specifically aimed at the internet, where people do have a lot of skill using existing sort of digital tools, versus in initiatives that are more, for example, an existing charity trying to build digital tools to expand their market. So we do that. But what I'm going to talk about a bit more is how we can help sort of these innovations flourish to decentralizing the current landscape of the internet. So here I had, for the next slide, I had a chart showing sort of like the increasing market cap, or like the stock value of the largest internet stocks. So they're called the FANG stocks usually, so it's Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, or now Alphabet. And we all know that they've been dominating more and more of the internet economy, taking up more of the spoils from the digital economy and moving towards natural monopolies, and are getting very hard to disrupt because of the economies of scale and unprecedented network effects we haven't previously really seen with in other markets as much. So if you look, I mean, this was quite a shocking statistic to me. We're aware of the centralization problem, but it appears that sort of the combined market value of the FANG stocks is 1.4 trillion. which is about equivalent to 13% of the total US economy, which should really worry us all. So basically, both from a perspective of that centralization of the internet, it becomes very or near impossible really for new alternatives or new competitors to try to disrupt these incumbent tech giants, especially also for European startups, very difficult, as we know. And it's on the other hand very important to do maybe something about this, as these companies rely so much on business models revolving around using and selling our personal data with very little control from us, the user. So if we do, we think that a big part of the NGI initiative should be to really think about, if we want a more value-driven internet, a more human-centric internet, how we can think about alternative business models and maybe alternative infrastructures that could help sort of facilitate the growth of alternative solutions. And I think actually a bit particularly now that we see a lot of new technologies emerge that could potentially have an enormous impact on how we live, as we talked about, not first the smartphone, but now with IoT and artificial intelligence, will be so disruptive. It is quite important that these technologies are, again, not dominated by just a handful of companies, or probably the same companies. So that's why we've been, so I'll be quite brief, but we've been thinking a lot about how we can decentralize the internet again, and I don't mean just from a technical perspective, but how can we cut out the middleman, but also from an innovation landscape perspective, how can we create alternatives to existing services that compete with and improve on existing services as well, and how can we ensure that this type of innovation is accessible by all and keeps a human-centric perspective in mind. So when you think about alternative business models that don't revolve around just collecting and selling our data and thus growing ever larger based on that, is that and that also we want to make sure that these alternative business models, that all the profits generated by those companies are not centralized in the hands of just quite few, but are shared more equally. So some interesting examples, I think, are the whole movement around platform cooperativism. Can we reimagine a service like Uber, like a cooperative or like a collectively owned platform where taxi drivers can set their own prices and ensure the revenues they generate remain in the local economy, and perhaps do not also amass all the data like other companies may do, or something like Mastodon C, which is the distributed sort of decentralized alternative to Twitter. And though these models are very interesting, as well as just generally digital social innovation or tech for good, as well as the wider open source movement, we think that more needs to be done to help stimulate them. It continues to be very difficult for these kind of initiatives, often very innovative initiatives, to sort of survive in that more centralized economy, despite getting a lot of really great help and a lot of funding from mostly actually the EU. That for them to really truly compete, we need alternative, they need to be able to really function as alternatives, especially as it is so hard to disrupt these things that are much better funded and they have much, usually much nicer to use tools, and they just work a bit better. Everyone's already there. So how do you get people there? And we think actually this is quite a good moment to really start thinking about this, because as these new technologies emerge as distributed ledger technologies like the blockchain, will really equip us and provide us with the right toolbox to do so. So I'll be quite quick on this last bit. So, oops. Opening the last slide. So because of time constraints, I won't go into too much detail about what we're thinking about in this space, but basically we propose a sort of model where we would rethink the internet as a commons. So I'm more than happy to talk about the technical details of that later. And I also really recommend having a look at some initiatives out there already, like Indie and Blockstack, which are looking at how you can think of the internet that is more distributed, where we all own a chunk. So in essence, it's basically the idea that we would see the internet itself, which has increasingly turned into a private space, more as a public space again. So when I talk about private space, I mean that we spend most of our time online on privately owned platforms that do set the rules and control what we do. So if you want smaller innovation to flourish on there, you really need to have some sort of public space or some idea where they at least could exist on a common sort of infrastructure. So One thing Nesta has been working on quite a lot is on the idea of like creating data commons, including on a large EU project some of you may have heard of called Decode. And it's basically thinking about if we can create a distributed infrastructure that could help the construction of these data commons, which would allow all of us a little like chunk of space on the internet on which our personal data exist. On a case-on-case basis, we can opt into the public space of the internet, the commons of the internet, and share our data on a case-by-case data basis. And then we would also allow these smaller initiatives to sort of build on top of that infrastructure and exist and compete a bit better in the digital economy. So basically, increasing more sort of grassroots digital innovation, if you will. We're not quite there, of course, and it is a bigger idea. And this will be a project that takes many years to complete, but I think it's something important to continue to think about when we're thinking about the next generation internet and thinking about how we can make it more human-centric and more ethical in the process. So, and I would be quite keen to discuss later in this session sort of what the role of institutions like Nesta, as well as governments and also the EU, which actually has been doing a lot in this space, should do in terms of like funding such an infrastructure and maintaining alternative solutions. So that was it, I think, for me.
A good talk, some really interesting ideas, and some ideas on how we might create alternatives to the incumbents which we see on the internet today. So for the fourth talk, I'm going over to the US. Norsha Contractor is a professor at Northwestern University. He's going to tell us his thoughts on the impact of technology on innovation in multidimensional knowledge networks at scale. So I'll hand over to you, Norsha.
Hi, thank you again very much for giving me this opportunity to join remotely. I've enjoyed the presentations that we have heard so far, and I'll try to be as brief as possible so that we'll have time for Q&A. What I wanted to focus on today was something that is a little bit of old and a little bit of new, and that is every time we have a new technology, whether it is but now we're talking about digital innovations, but even if you go back in history, there was a book that was written by Ethel Solapool titled Forecasting the Telephone, and it shows us that we are really, really, really bad at being able to forecast the ways in which we can use technologies to accomplish things. And so part of what I wanted to do today is to learn a lesson from history as we think about the ways in which today's digital technologies are going to help us facilitate innovation. And I want to walk us through 3 steps, just in the interest of time. The 3 words that I'm going to focus on here are substitution, enlargement, and reconfiguration. When we start using a technology for the first time, when we think of how we use the internet and how we began to use it for a variety of purposes, the first thing we do is try to see how we can use it to substitute for what we are already doing. And so this is in a sense to automate current practices, to make things work faster, cheaper, and more reliably. And we immediately try to say that if we can do that, then do we have benefits that we gain from it? And the history shows us consistently that if we think about using a technology simply as a substitute for what we already do, the benefits, the cost benefits that we think might accrue are actually overcompensated by the cost of the technology, the cost of the infrastructure, the training costs, and so on and so forth. So we fail to see benefits of a technology if we think about using it only as a substitute for what we already do. The second step, which was the word enlargement, suggests that not only when we substitute and use a technology to do what we want, in other words, to nurture the innovation networks, for example, that Jonathan and Lars touched on, we do a lot more of it. And that's the enlargement. That is, because it is easier to do it, we spend a lot more time working on it. We try to increase the activities that we engage in, etc. And that can have some potential benefits, but at the same time, it's like, just a very trivial example, when we worked on a typewriter, we finished a draft and that was the end of the paper, and then when we could do it as a substitute with a word processor, we spend a lot more time, not less time, because we kept thinking we could revise it further and further, etc. And so part of what technology is doing is it's making us think about enlargement activities where we do a lot more of it than what we did before. Again, history shows us that if we just focus on substitution and enlargement, we are really not going to reap some of the benefits that we might want to. That last step that needs to happen. Think of it as this way. Enlargement and substitution are necessary for sustaining innovation, but the most important thing to think about is that third category, which is reconfiguration. That is, how is it that we can try to reconfigure the ways in which we innovate to see whether that can help us take advantage of the modern methods. And in my mind, the most fundamental assumption that we have to reconfigure is to think about the fact that today our networks are not just individuals. It's not just connecting people with people through the technology, but we need to think of this as a multidimensional network where the technology can become a node in the network. We have knowledge repositories, we have artificial intelligence machines, we have cognitive assistants. And so part of what we need to think in terms of reconfiguring our notion of digitizing innovation is to broaden our scope of the network as being not just a network of individuals connected through technologies, but bringing the technology inside the network as an active entity, as an active agent. In some social science work, this is referred to as actor networks, where some of the actors could be technologies. In other cases, they're referred to in terms of the dynamics of socio-materiality. But all of this to say that it's important for us to think about this multidimensional network. One final comment here. What else needs to happen in order for this reconfiguration to happen? One of the ways in which people have begun to look at that now is to think about the technology not either as good or bad, but in terms of the affordances that it provides us. And I'm going to just touch on 4 affordances in wrapping up here that I think are very important towards understanding the ways in which we innovate. One is visibility. Until quite recently, the internet and other technologies allowed us to communicate with one another, but it was not necessarily visible to third parties. If you think about what is happening with social media, if I were to send an @mention on Twitter to Jonathan, not only does Jonathan see it, and assuming I don't do this as a direct message, but as an @mention, everyone else can see that I had a connection. I sent a message to Jonathan, for example. So that provides visibility that allows us to rethink the ways in which we understand who knows who and who knows who knows who, because our perceptions of the network are fundamentally changed because of the new ways in which media allow us to engage in these kinds of social interactions in semi-public contexts. The second is editability. And that is not only are people who are in a particular interaction can see what was discussed and what was been talked about there, etc., but you can then go back and edit collectively what these contributions are. This is, again, a relatively new phenomena that technology, a new affordance that technology provides that was not there until quite recently. How can we take advantage of that to help with innovation, to advance innovation? The third is persistence. This has been around for a while, but it says that when we act in certain ways, these interactions are kept persistent, so somebody can come in later on and take a look at it. One of the big challenges in organizations is people are always saying, you know, I can come up with a new idea to solve this problem, but I'm sure that somebody in the organization has actually solved this problem in the past. But the cost of finding it and where it is located, etc., is so prohibitive that we tend to dismiss that approach and go back and reinvent things and rework and redo things. And I think that persistence provides us ways in which we can now enhance our innovation. And then the last one is association. Again, because of the ways in which we are providing, using social media, especially in the enterprise and in public, we now have the ability to associate people with who they connect with, but also what they connect with, who's uploading what documents, who's tagging what documents, who's following what projects. And all of this is, these 4 affordances, visibility, editability, persistence, and association, make it possible for us to reconfigure the ways in which we are using digital technologies to help enhance our understanding of what kinds of innovations we can come up with in the future. And of course, all of this can be done at scale because none of these things require us to necessarily focus on small groups. As Katya was mentioning, that we have the ability now to do this in very large crowds, for example. And so I just wanted to leave us with this notion that as we think of digitization and technologies, we think of not stopping with substitution and enlargement, but challenging ourselves to think about reconfiguration, think of this as a multidimensional network, and think of the affordances that digital technologies provide us now, which include visibility, editability, persistence, and association. I will stop with that.
Thank you, Noche. There were some good links there with what Jonathan was saying. Certainly the affordances of the technology and the evidence base have some close connections. So I'm going to hand over to someone in the room right now, Sergi Figuerella, who's from I2CAT in Spain. Sergi, I think you're going to be talking a little bit about the sorts of infrastructures that need to underpin the innovation processes. So I'll hand over to you in the room.
Okay, thank you. I have so much slides. I don't know if you can put them. Yes, I should try because there are some pictures and the idea to try over there. It's possible. Yeah. Okay. In the meantime, I will start. I mean, it was difficult to be sure to have a topic that was not covered by my previous speakers, because I think that the explanation they have done is covering most of the issues that we are related with. However, coming back to the infrastructure issues, I think that sometimes we are too generic, or it's not that easy to know what an infrastructure is. Obviously, I will not be covering what all the infrastructures could be. But these days that we have network infrastructures, which are the ones that are providing service and research validation. And here, one of the things that we need is to be sure that they are operational in the experimentation scene. They are shared and they are open. Because suddenly what we see is large testbeds, trials, but they are not in operational scenarios, something that can really demonstrate what happens in the day-by-day life. And this is something that, let me see that coming. Yeah.
Next one.
Okay, no, next one, yes. If you can. Okay, perfect. Good. Yeah, next one. Okay, so here, as I said, I was commenting about different types of infrastructure that could be. As I said in the first one of the things that we also need, and I have seen from the expertise working on different projects and activities, is that sometimes what we do is just improvements and updates on infrastructure. And one of the things that we have to do is to be sure that we make incremental innovation over there. So it's not just the fact that we have just networks as infrastructure, that many types of different infrastructures and they are needed. This is something that we cannot avoid. And the fact that I am saying that they should be shared too is because we have to be sure that they are part of the new business models that arise. For example, now we are working in Barcelona on the fact that how we are able to share a 5G infrastructure to be sure that we are not deploying antennas all around, because in the end this is a problem. And what you try to do is to see how a 5G neutral host could be something that could solve some of the problems that 5G will face into the cities and society. Then also we have other types of infrastructures, platforms, which facilitate collaboration. And here I want to introduce a topic that some of the colleagues before have already commented about, how we should have a collaboratory. It's important that we have all the pieces to establish collaboration between the different stakeholders that we have dealing surrounding infrastructures. For example, one of the questions we have is whether it would be possible or not to generate a universal innovation system open to every citizen, because sometimes all the infrastructure trials we have is like we forget the citizen. Obviously, we deliver a service to them, but it's like we don't consider what the opinion is, what they exactly need, and how they need it. And also infrastructures are a means for internet evolution. And here there is something that we are lately seeing in the scope. It's the fact that we should see that internet shouldn't be seen just as an engineering activity. It should also be considered as science. I mean, sometimes we consider that, as an example, that like TCP/IP is something that you learn at the university and is the basis of everything. And whenever you have to solve a problem, you have to solve a problem of a protocol, because this protocol cannot solve a problem. And the idea is that we should come back to the principles of when we have a protocol, okay, how we solve this. Sorry, whenever you have a problem, how we solve this problem. And this is the fact that internet is also science. And this is something that in Europe, I think that sometimes we mislead. Then also the fact that we shouldn't avoid to consider infrastructures as commodity. I've heard this many times. And in the end, we have to be sure that they need to be tied to the application, because at the end, they're providing a service. And if the service changes, the application might change. And whenever we want to do this in real time, it means that we need many things in between those two layers. Also, the fact that the application itself has to be tied to the user, because as we know now, we have thousands, millions of users that they have their own applications with their own requirements, and this is not something easy. Obviously, we might have here conflicts with some of the incumbents, because this means more investment and to be sure that the infrastructure is able to change. But we have to apply some of the new paradigms to see how it happens. The fact that now, for example, we have been dealing a lot with cloud, but now we are moving from a centralized cloud to a distributed cloud. What happens when you move this to the edge? What are the implications? How this changes the infrastructure itself? And at the end, what we have is a paradigm change, which means that I've seen this more in the US rather than Europe, which is the fact that we come from a moment where the ICT was being at the service for the industry, and we have to change. Now the industry has to be at the service of ICT. And for example, when you see the automation industry, whenever you go to Europe, you can see that all these manufacturers, car manufacturers, identifying how to put ICT into the car to provide more functionalities. Rather, when you go to US, you can identify how are people working in a main chipset with high capacity processing, and later on how we can put wheels and cover this. So this is a different mentality, and we have to change these things. Then another topic that I wanted to comment is the fact that sometimes we should look back, check the history, and see how things have evolved. And for example, it's quite interesting to see the study of Carlota Perez. When looking back about 240 years, you can identify that there have been different revolutions, where it's the Industrial Revolution, the Steam Revolution, let's say the oil and automotive revolution. And the idea is that what has been detected is that always there has been a period that there has been a crash in the revolution, and the problem is how you are able to put all this innovation that comes from this revolution into the society, which means that how you are able to make this innovation systemic. And the problem that we have as a society is that sometimes we forget that innovation does not only belong to the high tech, and we have to be able to be sure that it spans the whole economy system, which is something that is not yet fully solved. And if it doesn't happen, is when we have periods of, let's say, collapse, which is something that we could foresee also in the telecom. Now, from the, sorry, yes, the next one. I forgot to tell it. Yeah, changing. Okay. So the issue is that now it seems that we are in the medium of the period of the evolution in the telecom and IT. So we still have time to see what's the next, what's the evolution on how Europe can somehow take part of the leadership here. Next slide, please. And then, just also to finish, I wanted to put a reflection too. Is the fact that if we see the current innovation system we have, it's based in a triple helix, which means that we have the industry, the academia, and the government, and all of this is serving a massive market of consumers. Then what we have to evolve is how we put citizens into this ecosystem, which is something that has also been commented by some of the speakers too. But it is that we have to change the paradigm of innovation. Next one, please. And how we should do this? I mean, we have a clear example in Europe. I mean, obviously we didn't have the army as other regions have had, and where evolution has come, whether it's artificial intelligence, cyber skies, etc. The idea is that in Europe we have had an health good system, which means that at the top we had specialized hospitals, in the medium we have intermediate clinics, and then we have the primary health centers, which means that how we are able to build a platform, an infrastructure, which is able to connect all these elements, and then how we are able to transpose this into the society, create a new model which is able to put together high specialized labs, which means innovation, universities, research centers, together with a network of researchers and citizens labs, which are spread in the cities, and then how we are able to have a third level, which means the network of a primary citizens lab. So the idea is that we have to provide an infrastructure which is connecting all the layers, and from them we will be able to be competitive and to create innovation, which in the end is having a systematic innovation, which is something also discussed for the next people. So the conclusion is how we are able to build this research and innovation set of platform infrastructures, which are measuring different type of technologies, whether it could be network protocols, blockchain, I mean, different type of technologies, but at the end, how they serve this type of collaborations between the different agents or stakeholders that we have in this ecosystem. And this is a big challenge. So, thanks.
Thank you, Sergi. So that concludes the talks. How long have I got, Monique?
When will they put that out here?
No.
I guess half an hour. So I guess we have, I would say, 5 to 10 minutes for discussions and
Brilliant.
5 minutes for wrap up.
Great. So what I'd like to do now is, does anybody, first of all, in the room have questions for our panelists, especially those attending online?
Okay, so what I'd like to do at this point is, so panelists, you've heard each other talk. I'd like to know whether you would have any agreement or disagreement with what's been said, or anything you've heard that you strongly suggest that the community would should take attention of, maybe from one of the other speakers. So who'd like to go first? A hand in the air would appreciate. Okay, Lars Gunnar, I'll hand over to you first of all.
Okay, I think I learned from this discussion so that there is a sort of a complementarities between what we have been saying, and I think there is it's important to learn, for instance, about this idea about how the practice of research, science, practice of policy, and practice of market, how markets develop, and so on, the dynamics of it, and I think there is really a need for more interaction in terms of learning about what we actually know or ask about for the development of these digital innovation networks, which are multidimensional in a way. It includes both the digital industry itself, the market, policymakers, and science. So it's something that all are under the development of some innovation processes that are interacting. So I think we have more in common.
Anyone else? Jonathan?
Yeah, I would endorse that. Two other small things I'd drop in. The first is that there are a lot of things that come from classical network economics that I think we can usefully bear in mind. If there are network interactions, there will be a tendency for the pace of innovation or change to be either inefficiently fast, because everyone is racing to jump onto the next best thing, or inefficiently slow because people are afraid of stranded investments and therefore would rather wait to see whether something works before investing a great deal. The other thing that comes with networks is what's called tipping, which is that if you join a group and you can interact with them and not with others, then people will tend to over-connect in a certain sense. That's true technologically, but it's also true intellectually. And I think one needs to be aware of that. The other thing I wanted to mention, I mean, there are a ton of things. This could usefully go on as an interactive thing for a long time, is the idea that we seem to be maintaining something of commission dogma, which is that innovation is good. Therefore, more faster, more disruptive, more widespread innovation must be better. But it's important to remember that social innovation sometimes takes time. It's sometimes necessary for the inventor to turn the innovation over to users, who then will have to go through this arc that Noshir identified. In other words, you start by using something for one purpose, then you discover that you can scale it up or use it for other things. It may be that I buy a technology and it changes the way I do business. If the pace of innovation is too fast, or if switching is too fast, all things that we think of as are good a priori, then we don't stick with anything long enough to know whether it works or not. And we keep running to things that have nothing more to offer than mere novelty. So I think that notion, and we saw this in the dot-com bubble, right? People were selling slide packs or raising vast amounts of capital just on a nice idea that didn't work. Perhaps it might have worked had it had a chance to work, but the dynamics of this network interaction, as we saw in the market and are now seeing to a certain extent in science, may militate against actually getting the answer right in any sustainable or durable sense.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any other final comments? I thought there might be. So, Nosha, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this session. I think it's been, I think you've done a great job of bringing folks who spoke adjacent to each other, if I might, about ideas that were in the same, were aligned, but didn't really have that much of immediate overlap. I resonate also with the comments that Lars and Jonathan just made with regards recognizing that the temporal pace of innovation shouldn't automatically be biased towards high speed. I think that is a mistake. Jonathan wrote a comment here that I like very much. He said, we normally say, don't just sit there, do something, that in fact, we should turn that on its head and say, don't just do something, sit there and think about it and to reflect on some of these issues. And again, it speaks to the fact that even while technologies give us the opportunity to engage in high-speed communication, that doesn't mean that we have to feel compelled to do that at all times. And I think that a lot of the ideas, and especially in the context of innovation, requires us to slow down and at times be able to reflect in ways that is possible, but is not the norm when you think of technology, and we want to always go with the high speed associated with technology. And I also think that the technology provides us with the notion of, I think Jonathan referred to this in the complex systems literature, is referred to as the densification of the network, where a network actually gets paralyzed because it is so heavily connected. And especially in the area of innovation, innovation thrives on brokering ideas amongst people who are not, who come from disparate communities. And so it's very important for innovation to privilege network ties that are connecting people who are not connected to each other through a lot of third parties, because then those are the kinds of network, the disparate networks are the ones that are more likely to create the innovation. Now, you might need a denser network to take an innovation and implement it, but we need to make a distinction between the networks that enable the creation of the innovation and the networks that enable the dissemination of that, or the implementation of that innovation.
Thank you, Nosha. Any final thoughts? We're really enjoying the background tweeting of the birds, Nosha. We're very envious here in Brussels at that. So, any final comments from the panelists? No? Okay, so may I say thank you very much for everyone who's joined this session from wherever you're sitting. It's been a great pleasure. We have recorded all the content, so if you didn't hear everything, we'll be creating minutes of this meeting so you can go back and read what was said. So thank you very much, everyone. And I'll leave it there and hand over to Monique.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of minutes. Thank you, Michael. I would like to thank Steve Taylor, that has been our art director the whole day, very patient with delays, broadcasting issues, and thanks a lot also to people that attended remotely. In the room we've got some people leaving, some coming. I'm pleased that at the end of the day we had quite lively and interesting discussions. I think we've heard many different interesting things, from more technical ones to more, let's say, sorry, I'm in the bad spot here, to more social business kind of arguments. I'm covering them, sorry. What I think it's clear is that to define, to draw the next generation internet and to make it happen, it will require collaborative efforts from different kind of stakeholders in the society. And policymakers are key players here. Too bad Peter had to leave, but actually the discussions will continue tomorrow. I don't know how many of you will be at Net Futures, but I guess most of us will be there. So the debates will continue, contribution will go on. What's going to happen on the Digital Innovation Networks Forum side is that, as Michael anticipated, there will be minutes from the day. We will have presentations of the panelists available online, if panelists, of course, agree on that. And the idea is also that there will be a follow-up publication on the Digital Innovation Networks white paper that will follow up soon, so stay tuned. And also, you might have seen some flyers there. There are some next appointments that we would like to draw your attention to. In a few weeks in Volos, in Greece, there's going to be a CAPS community workshop that is focusing especially on aspects related to social innovation. We've heard a lot today, so there's going to be follow-up discussions there. We're going to have the 13th of September the Next Generation Internet Forum in Barcelona, kindly hosted by I2CAT. So we will definitely have other chances to discuss and continue on the initial thoughts that we put on the table today. So thanks a lot to everybody, and have a safe journey back home if you go home. Bye.
Goodbye.
By the way, Nosh, I really like your birds.
Well, so the irony, of course, of this is that when he said that he enjoyed the twittering or the tweeting, I thought he meant Twitter for a second. It's just a telling statement that my first reaction was, oh, I didn't realize there was